Welcome to Lemon Stream, where we feature stories of the unknown, mysteries, post-apocalyptic fiction, and other weird stuff. So settle in, get comfortable, get ready. Here we go. The New World, Chapter 1. The Day the World Changed. The ground shook like a big truck was driving by. After about 10 seconds, it stopped. "Whoa," said Gramps. "You don't feel that too often." "What you mean?" asked 4-year-old Sydney. "What was it?" "It was an earthquake. It happens when the ground shakes. It doesn't happen much around here where we live, only every few years, but in some places it happens a lot." "Is the world breaking?" Sydney asked. No, Gramps laughed. "It's just the ground shaking. It happens sometimes. The world doesn't break." "Hon," said Ma, "the power is out. I just put that ham in the oven half an hour ago, and now the power's out." Ma was upset. Everyone was coming up for family dinner, and the power picked this time to go out. "I hope it comes back on before it gets dark," 7-year-old Timmy said. "Maybe the earthshake did it," Sydney said. Gramps chuckled. "Oh, probably not. It just happens sometimes. Hey, Sydney, Lucas, Timmy, why don't you boys go in the living room and play? Timmy, ask Mommy if she can come in here for a minute." Gramps turned to Ma. "We need to figure out what to do about dinner if the power doesn't come back on." "Uncle Mikey is here," shouted Timmy, pressing his face against the window. A white SUV was coming down the driveway. "Yeah," Gramps said. "He said he was coming early with some food so we could get it set up. Let me see how close Uncle Sandy and Aunt Sylvia are." Gramps picked up his phone from the table and dialed a number. He paused and looked confused. "Ma," he said, "can I borrow your phone?" "What's wrong with yours, hon?" "I dialed Sylvia's number, but it just says all circuits are busy. Please try later. I haven't heard that message since Tropical Storm Irene." Ma handed her phone to Gramps and said, "Sometimes I hate these new phones. They only work when they want to." Gramps took her phone and dialed the number again. After a moment, he put it down. "Well," he said, "so much for that. I guess we'll just have to wait for them." "Didn't work?" Ma said, alarmed. "No," said Gramps. I didn't even get a message that time. Didn't even ring." "Did the earthshake do it?" Sid asked. Gramps smiled. "No, Sid. Run along to the living room and play." Jolene came into the room, looking down at her phone as she walked. When she reached the table, she looked up. "This is stupid," she said. "My text messages to Darren won't go through." "Neither of our phones work," Gramps said. "The tower must be down or something. I hope it comes back online soon." Heavy footsteps climbed up the stairs and the door opened. A towering, muscular, bearded figure came into the room, carrying a banana box with both hands. "It's Uncle Mikey," said Jolene, loud enough for the kids to hear in the living room. "Hey," said Michael, nodding his head to the 3 adults. "Does your phone work?" Ma asked him. He looked confused. "Yeah, why wouldn't it?" "Aunt Sylvie! Aunt Sylvie!" Sid shouted, looking out the window. "Well," Gramps said, "looks like we don't need to call them after all." "Here's the food," Michael said, placing the box on the table. "Why wouldn't my phone work?" "None of ours work," Ma answered. "We think the tower's down." Michael pulled his phone out of his pants pocket. "I'll call you," he said, "and see what happens." "Hey, Joe," Gramps said, "when does Darren get out of work today?" "He should be on his way home now," Jolene said. "That's why I was trying to call him. He needs to pick up milk." "I'm getting nothing," Michael said, taking his phone from his ear. "That's weird." "Daddy, Daddy," Sid cried out. "That boy's better than a doorbell," Gramps laughed. A green pickup truck was careening down the driveway. "What's he doing?" said Jolene. "Why's he going so fast? Don't hit Sandy's truck." Darren laid on the brakes as he neared the house, and the truck slid about 8 feet in the dirt. Sandy and Sylvie were just getting out of their truck and looked towards him. The door to Darren's truck swung open, and he climbed out. He was a skinny man of about medium height, with lots of upper body muscle. He began walking quickly toward the house, limping on the leg that took a bullet in Afghanistan. Sylvia helped 7-year-old Nathan out of their truck, and they all followed Darren into the above-ground basement. Ma opened the door for them as they climbed the steps from the basement. "Where's the fire, Bud?" Sandy laughed. Darren came through the door. "Where's Joe?" he said. "Where's Joe?" "Over by the stove," Gramps said. "What's going on?" "New York," Darren said. "New York?" Gramps asked. "New York was hit." "What do you mean New York was hit? Like 911? Joe asked, stepping between Gramps and Darren. "The sheriff's office got an emergency communication. They said a nuclear device was detonated in New York City. They said everyone should find shelter until further notice. The sheriff said they're moving everyone from the jail to the shelter under the courthouse. I might have to go back at midnight to cover dispatch." Everyone was quiet, too stunned to talk. After what seemed like a couple minutes, but was only a few seconds, Gramps spoke. You can't go. We have to get to shelter. We have about 7 hours to find some place and get all our stuff in it. Anyone out there after that will die." "What?" Michael said. "There will be a radioactive fallout from that explosion," said Gramps. "We're about 7 to 8 hours downwind from New York City. I've seen the fallout maps. If we're not sheltering by then, we'll die." "Okay," Sandy said. "Then let's get down to that shelter under the courthouse in Fielding." "But that's where all the prisoners are going," Sylvie said. "Then we can shelter here," Michael said. "Ma and Gramps have plenty of food here. I'll go get Denise and Afton." That won't work," said Gramps. "We have an above-ground basement. We need to be underground to be protected from the radiation. I can explain more later, but we need to get moving fast." Gramps paused, then looked at Michael. "You have a big basement, right?" "Yeah," Michael answered. "Can we all fit in there with a bunch of supplies for a couple weeks?" "Yeah, it's pretty big and all finished off and carpeted." "Okay," Gramps continued, "that would be perfect. We need to hurry because we need to make 2 to 3 trips from here to your house with a truck to get all the supplies there. Michael, you need to head back to your place. I'll go over with the first trip in the truck and start getting things set up. You'll need to let Denise know what's going on. Tell her to draw off all the water she can before the holding tank is empty. Put the water in anything you can and just get it into the basement. Get all your food down there. Get the mattresses from all your beds down there and get that chair from the living room down there. And any batteries you can find and a couple toys for your daughter. Not a lot. There won't be room for a lot. Oh, and take the toilet seat off one of your toilets and take it down with some toilet paper. Stop out front on your way and tell your brother to get down here and help us load the truck. Joe, you and the boys draw off all the water you can here and get containers into the truck. Then get all of Darren's guns and ammo from upstairs. Sylvie, you and Nathan help Ma load the truck. All the bins from the pantry have to go, and the bins in the closet and the office need to go too, and the ones in the basement. Sandy and Darren, grab the blue bin from the office closet and head over to Michael's house as fast as you can. The bin has plastic sheeting and duct tape in it. Cover all the windows on the outside and seal the edges with the duct tape. If you have time, do the insides too. Cover the doors also, but do the front door last and set that one up with a gasket, like you would if you were removing lead paint or asbestos from the house. It's hard to explain. There's a name for it, but I don't remember it. "I know what you mean," Sandy said. "Okay, let's get going," said Gramps. "The clock is ticking and every second counts if we want to make it through this. We'll have plenty of time to talk more about it tonight." There was a flurry of activity as people rushed to their appointed tasks. Gramps fumbled around through shelves, closets, boxes, and drawers, pulling out wires, radios, batteries, and other miscellaneous items. The men took off down the driveway, and the ladies and kids moved quickly to their own tasks. There was little talking. Everyone kept to their work in hushed busyness, all with a growing feeling that their world had changed forever. Nobody could imagine what the coming days were going to bring. The New World, Chapter 2, Into the Darkness. It was dark by the time everyone finished their work. 3 trips with the truck and utility trailer got all the food and supplies from Gramps and Ma's house to Michael's and Denise's house. The windows were covered inside and out with plastic, and Sandy even put a ladder up against the house and climbed up to the chimney and sealed it off. Sandy and Sylvia were there with their son Nathan. Joe and Darren were there with their 3 boys. 17-year-old Stevie, Ma and Gramps' youngest, was there, and Michael and Denise were there with their 3-year-old daughter, Afton. "Gramps," said Denise, "this is Shayla. She's a friend of my sister. She's been staying with us for a few days. Just needed a place to be for a little bit." "Good to meet you, Shayla," said Gramps. "Wish it had been at a better time, but at least you're here." "Yeah," said Shayla. "Thanks, and same to you. I just can't wait till all this is over. I haven't been able to get on Facebook or TikTok for hours, and it's annoying me. They better get all that fixed up tonight so I can get back on tomorrow." "Well," said Gramps, "those things might not be the top priority after what happened. It might be a few days." "They need to get on to it," she said. "I know you old people don't have much to do with new stuff, but us young people use it a lot. We need it. It's how we do everything. It's our whole world, so they need to fix it right off. I think the government should send people to make sure they fix it right off." "Maybe they will," said Gramps. "We'll probably know more in the morning. Darren's going to try to get some news on the radio." Gramps had set up a portable solar panel outside and run wires from it into the basement, then to a battery and inverter. Darren sat on the corner of a mattress with his radio, scanning frequencies and listening for human voices through the whine and crackle. He had run a wire upstairs to use as an antenna, but still was having no success picking up transmissions. "Sorry everything's such a jumble down here," Michael said. "We kind of just stuck things where we could." "No problem at all," said Gramps. "We're going to have plenty of time to organize things here. The main thing at this point is that we got here." Gramps fumbled through some bins and boxes, holding a flashlight in one hand. Because he was very heavy set, the activity was wearing him out quickly. He was starting to get a little flustered when he exclaimed, "Ah, yes!" He pulled a small box out of a bin and opened it. "Here's what we're dealing with," he said. "When that nuke went off, it sent up a bunch of radioactive dust and dirt. We are downwind from them, so it's going to fall right over us. If we're exposed to it, we'll die. We will be protected by distance and density. Further away we are from the radioactive particles, the safer we are, and the more dense materials we have between us and the radiation, the safer we are. We sealed the windows to keep distance between us and the radiation, and we came down here to the basement to get density, the dirt and the stone all around us, between us and the radiation. At this stage, distance and density are life. The good news is the radiation will decay fairly quickly. We just have to wait it out down here, probably a week or two. After the first week, it should be safe to go out for short amounts of time. Darren, open the front pouch on the red backpack next to you. There's a bottle in there labeled potassium iodide. Each of us adults need to take 1 pill, and each of the kids needs half a pill. Our thyroid will absorb radioactive iodine from the fallout. These pills will fill our thyroids with safe iodine so that there won't be room for the bad iodine. That can save us from radiation poisoning, cancer, and other bad things. This thing," he pulled out a little black device about the size of a cell phone. "This is a dosimeter. It's not the best thing for the job, but it was cheap, and it'll get the job done. It measures radiation and sounds an alarm when there's an unsafe amount." The dosimeter beeped once as Gramps powered it up. He walked to the steps and started climbing them, one at a time. He held the device in front of him as he went. He reached the top of the steps and began to walk around the house cautiously. Finally, he waddled back down the steps. "I don't know," he shook his head. "Maybe it's not working right, or maybe I'm not using it right. I should have learned how to use it before now. It doesn't seem to detect any radiation. I'll check again in an hour, I guess." "I'm hungry," said Sid. "Yeah, we should eat," Gramps said. "Let's save the canned and packaged foods for later, since they're going to keep. Tonight we'll eat some of the food we prepared for the cookout. before it goes bad. Potato salad, hot dogs, and garden salad. I know most of us adults don't feel much like eating, but we should try to eat something at least. What if I need to poop? Timmy asked. Good question, Timmy. Michael, get that green 5-gallon bucket next to you and put the toilet seat on it. That little light brown bin there has lime in it. We'll add some of it once or twice a day to keep the smell down. Denise began handing out paper plates and plastic forks, while Joe set up the food on a couple bins in the middle of the room. The adults can sleep on the mattresses, Gramps said, wherever you can find room. The kids are smaller, so they should be fine on the carpet. I'll sleep in the chair since I can't run my CPAP. I need to sleep upright. As folks began to shut off their flashlights, it became apparent just how dark it was. One of the kids began to whine. Gramps plugged in an LED light into the power inverter. The solar panel won't put out a lot of juice, he said, so we'll reserve the panel and battery to run this night light and to keep the radios charged. We'll keep our cell phones off and power them up once a day to see if we can connect anything. Gramps was cut off by a low, roaring rumble. A faint glow lit up the room at the top of the steps. What the heck? Sandy exclaimed. Gramps turned on his flashlight and picked up the dosimeter. It beeped as he turned it on. One step at a time, he climbed the stairs. About halfway up, he stopped. Okay, this isn't good. What? Asked Ma. The numbers are going way up as I climb the stairs. Be careful, hon, Ma said. Why don't you come back down here? It's still in the safe range, Gramps said. He took another 2 steps. It's even higher. Gramps craned his neck to look into the room above, then took another step. Suddenly, the dosimeter began shrieking. Gramps hurriedly, as fast as his large frame could move, descended the steps again. I guess we're not going upstairs for a while, he said. But I did see out the window, and there's a bright glow to the south. I wonder where, said Denise. There was a quiet pause. Maybe Boston, Darren said. Sounds about right, Sandy said. Maybe, Gramps said, we should just get some sleep, and we can figure things out when we're fresh in the morning. Although he knew probably nobody was sleeping tonight. The sleepless minutes drew into hours. Every half hour or so there was a new rumble, sometimes faint, sometimes barely detectable, other times stronger and more violent. One shook the house so violently it sounded like some window panes shattered. And the night sky lit up almost like day for over half an hour. With each rumble, the men and women huddled in the basement felt smaller and feebler, and with each shake they felt a little more hope slip away. The world they knew yesterday was gone, and would never be again. The New World, Chapter 3, The Radio. Whose phone is this? Gramps said. He held up a phone in one hand and used the other to pull a charging cable out of the power inverter. Hey, that's mine, whined Shayla. I need that charged. Don't unplug it. This power system is to power the light at night and to keep the radio charged, said Gramps, irritation in his voice. There's not enough juice for anything else. That's not fair, she replied. I need to be ready when everything comes back online. I've been videoing things, and I'm going to make us all famous online when everything comes back. If you video me again, said Sandy, I'll punch you in the face and break your phone. Ugh, Shayla grunted, rolling her eyes. Everybody was irritable from stress, exhaustion, and sleeplessness. Shayla, said Gramps, there is no more cell network. The towers are dead, the network is dead, the internet is dead, the social media servers are a melted pile of scrap. Everything is gone, nothing is coming back. Your phone is a useless paperweight, so we're not going to waste power charging it. You don't know that. Shush, shush, Darren waved his hand. There was a faint voice coming from the radio. He adjusted the squelch and volume and tweaked the frequency. I got it, he said. Kids and adults gathered around in the dim room to hear the first human voice from outside the house since they sheltered. The little handheld radio crackled and whined, but the voice came through loud and clear. It sounded like a young man's voice, maybe early 20s. And they said they were going north to look for food. I couldn't give them anything myself because I don't have more than a couple more meals. The voice paused, then continued. The other group that came by today was sick. Their hair was falling out, and that kid was puking his brains out. They said Augusta is gone. It got hit last night. Must have been the big one I felt. The one that knocked down the neighbor's house. People I talked to on the radio said they hit Augusta, Bangor, Portland. Boston was hit too, and Worcester. I don't know about any other places. Someone said Canada got it too. There's some hammers from other parts of the country talking about what's going on, but I'm not interested in that right now. All I know is that everybody here is heading north. The survivors from the Portland area are heading north. Everyone who made it out of Augusta is heading up 27. They say that most of the people from the Bangor area are walking up I-95. Everyone is looking for food and clean water. That's all that matters right now. Everybody is walking. Some cars work, some don't, but all the roads are blocked by trees and fallen rocks and crashed cars and trucks. The stores are all looted. Nobody has food. Wait. There's another group going by now, about 20 of them. I'm not even going out this time. I have nothing for them. Oh my, they're losing their hair too. One of them has a gun. I used to think guns were scary, but I sure wish I had one now. I'm going to stop talking while they pass by. The voice went quiet. The group in the shelter were dead quiet too, tensely listening to each word. After what seemed like forever, the voice came back. Those guys aren't going to make it. They're way too sick. But they had death and murder in their eyes. If they find someone, oh, Lord, pity their soul. They look like they'd kill their own mother for a slice of bread. He paused again and then resumed. This is really getting scary. I wish I had some place to go. These people are getting scary. The zombie apocalypse, it's here. The man on the radio grunted. Oh, I feel like I need to throw up, but nothing's coming. When New York first got hit, they said that there were shelters in Augusta. A lot of people went there. I didn't have a ride, but maybe it didn't make a difference. Who knows what happened to those people in the shelters when the missile hit the city? Who knows? What I know is that nothing will ever be the same. Nothing will ever be the same. It's over. The world is gone. They destroyed everything for greed and power, and we get to suffer for it. He grunted again. I need to rest. I got a can of chicken and half a loaf of bread. I think I can make 3 or 4 meals from it if I do chicken sandwiches. After that, it sounded like he was puking. After that, I don't know. I don't know if I can even keep it down right now. I'm going to try. I'm putting the radio away until morning. I'll be back to talk again then. Thank you for listening. Dylan, out for the night. The radio went silent, except for the static. Darren pulled out a pen and a little notepad and wrote down a string of numbers. Gramps looked around the room at the stacks of canned and dried foods, the bags of grains, the canisters of dry milk, drinks and cooking supplies, and the stacked cases of bottled water. A little bit ago, he was feeling sorry for himself and the situation, but suddenly he felt very rich and very grateful. The New World, Chapter 4, Community. I'm gonna go crazy, said Michael. Everyone heard the frustration in his voice. I just need to smoke. I really need to smoke. I haven't smoked in 3 days. Tell me about it, Sandy said. Sylvie and I haven't had one since we left the house to come up here. How long? Michael asked Gramps. In 4 more days, we should be able to spend a short time upstairs each day. It depends on the radiation readings. 4 days, Michael groaned. Oh, wah, 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 Shayla chimed. You guys are a bunch of whiny asses. Michael looked at Gramps and cocked his head. I'm going to punch her, he said. Can't smoke? I'm stuck down here with that. We'll make it, Gramps cut in. Just a few more days and the radiation will be down where we can spend a short time out of this hole. It was funny how the basement, which only a few days ago seemed so huge, now felt like a closet. Denise, Gramps asked, craning his neck to look past Michael, do you think you can use some of your herb with some of the ingredients we have down here to make an edible? Maybe that would help those of you that use it. I don't know. Well, maybe, replied Denise. I'll see. It won't be the same, but I bet it would help. I don't touch that stuff, Shayla said. It makes me feel funny. You guys are gross. I don't know how you use it. I don't use it either, Joe said to Shayla. But you know what I figured out? If I don't like something, I can choose to not use it. Wow, imagine that. Ugh, Shayla grunted. I'm just saying it's gross, you know? It's my right to say that, and I'm not going to shut up just because you don't like what I'm saying. And neither am I, Joe responded. Well, Shayla huffed. I'm just freedom of speech and all that. You're just mean because you can't handle it. All you people are so wimpy, like crybabies. Sandy turned to Gramps. Just turn your head, old man, the other way for a few seconds. And Michael and I will take care of this, and we'll feel so good we won't need to smoke for a week. Stop it, Shayla whined. I didn't do anything to you guys. See? You all just hate me for no reason. It's stupid that you were all like that. Shayla, just chill, Denise said. If you didn't talk to them like that, Ma chimed in, then maybe they wouldn't talk to you like that. You get what you give. I just wish, Shayla sobbed, I just wish people would treat me good. Everywhere I go, I'm nice to people, but people always hate me for no reason. Try treating other people the way you want them to treat you, Ma said. It doesn't matter, said Shayla. It's always the same. When we get out of here, I'll just leave. You can't, said Ma. You would starve. Then I'll take some food with me. You ain't taking no food from here, Sandy said. The food stays here. You can go if you want. You want food? Then you stay and work and contribute like the rest of us. Ugh, you guys are so unfair. It's not unfair, said Gramps. This food and these supplies, they belong to the community here. Everyone needs to work as a community if we're going to survive. We need to survive to make a future for these little ones here. We're their only hope now. Anyone who doesn't want to be a part of the community is free to do what they want, but the food belongs to the community. I still don't think it's right. I don't intend to be mean, said Gramps, but it doesn't matter what you think. You are free to leave any time you want, and you can take with you all the food you brought. But I didn't... Shayla trailed off to silence. This stinks, Darren said. Everyone turned to him. I can't get that guy back, the guy north of Augusta. I've been monitoring his frequency all day. Nothing. Maybe he's... Joe didn't finish her sentence. He wasn't in a shelter, Sylvia said, and maybe he got sick. Or, Stevie said, maybe some of those people got him. You know, the zombies? Darren shook his head. We'll never know, he said. We'll never stinkin' know. But there's one thing we do know, said Michael. Everyone is headed this way. Everyone wants what we have, and they'll do anything to get it. The ones coming now might not make it because they're sick, but when the others get out of their shelters, they're going to be hungry and desperate, and they're going to want what we have. It was a sobering thought. Michael was right. They had mere days to get ready for a zombie apocalypse, mere days to figure out what to do and to come to terms with what they would have to do to protect their children and their food. Those stacks of boxes, bins, and bags of food had become more valuable and more coveted than all the gold in Fort Knox. The New World, Chapter 5, Survival. "Are zombies coming?" asked Timmy. "No," Joe answered, "just people who might act like them." "We need a diamond sword," Timmy said. He swung his arm through the air like he had a sword in his hand. "Diamond swords kill zombies real good." "We have guns," Darren said. "Guns are better than swords." "Ugh," Shayla grunted. "You guys are so violent." "Because we want to defend ourselves?" Sandy asked. "No," said Shayla. "You shouldn't even have guns. They're way too dangerous. Only police should have guns. They're supposed to protect us." Darren shook his head and rolled his eyes. "Okay," he said. "When the mobs come, you go out in the driveway and call the police to come take care of you. We'll stay in here with our guns and protect the kids." "Ah," Shayla grunted again. "You guys just don't get it. You're so stupid." "We are so stupid," Michael chimed in. "But we are the ones in the shelter with food and guns. What did you bring to survive with?" "Well," Shayla said, I think the food is partly mine because I'm here too, and I helped carry it in here, so it's all part mine. I could take my part and go somewhere else if you keep harassing me." Sandy looked at her and raised an eyebrow. "Try to take some of our food, and you'll find out what the guns are for." "But," Timmy spoke up, "what will we do when the zombies come? Can I help fight them?" No, Sylvie said. You kids won't have to fight anyone." "You'll be safe and sound," Denise added. "You'll be right in here." "We should have some kind of plan, though," Joe said. "Yes," Darren agreed. "We should figure it out ahead of time. Hey, Gramps?" "Whoa," Gramps said. He had been napping in the recliner, tucked between two stacks of plastic bins. "Are you okay, hon?" Ma asked. "Yeah," he said groggily, "just tired." "Why are you tired? You slept all night." Just having some issues." "What issues?" Ma asked, concern in her voice. "Nothing serious," Gramps replied. "Probably just getting too much salt these last few days. This canned food is full of salt. I should have planned ahead with some lower sodium food for myself." "We're talking about planning for when the people come," Darren said. If they come. If they come for our food." "Oh, okay," said Gramps. He hesitated for a moment to think. "Well, we should plan for some other things, too. In 3 or 4 days, we'll be able to start going out for short amounts of time. Hopefully. I've been thinking about how we go forward. What do you think about this? Joe, how about you take charge of our water? Count it up and ration it. In these bins somewhere, I have small bags of rock and sand and activated charcoal we can use to build a water filter. If we get things figured out now, then when we get out of this hole, we can get moving. Denise, maybe you can take charge of the food, inventory it all, and figure out a meal plan to ration it. We need to stretch it as far as we can because this winter is going to be a hungry one. Once food gathering is safe again outside, we need to gather as much as we can for our day-to-day meals so we can save the preserved food for winter. Sandy, you can handle construction and maintenance. We're going to have to build a lot of things when we get out of here. We can get started with a water still. I wish I'd printed out the plans instead of just saving them to my tablet, but it uses evaporation to extract clean water from the air. Yeah, Sandy said, I think I know what you mean. I can figure out how to put one together. I'll need the tools for my truck, though. Gramps nodded. Darren, you can take care of security, inventory all the guns and ammo, figure out a security plan for day to day, especially for when we get out of here, and come up with a plan just in case too many zombies come. I'll help Daddy dig for diamonds, Timmy beamed with pride. Then we can craft diamond swords. Sylvia, Gramps continued, you'll take charge of the clothing. You'll have to figure out how to wash and mend what we have and how to make more. I really didn't think to pack extra, and I know some of you only have what you're wearing. Michael, you're going to be the hunter. Figure out how to get meat for us. Well, I don't eat meat, Shayla said, so that's a waste of time. You don't have to eat it, Gramps said, but you might find this winter that you really appreciate having it. Stevie, you need to work with me. I'm going to work on energy. There's some things we can do to generate electricity, and if we get enough amperage, we can even run the well pump and get clean water and run some power tools and whatever. But I'm going to need help. You'll need to scavenge for parts I need, starting with an alternator from a car and some wires to adapt it for a bicycle, because it's wound for a higher rate of revolutions than, anyway. I need you to help me with that, and I need you to learn as much as you can about it so you'll know how to run it. That takes care of food, shelter, clothing, water, and security. What about me? Shayla said. I'm good at giving directions. I can be everybody's boss and make sure everybody does what they're supposed to, because some of them are lazy. Well, said Gramps, I think folks will be fine with what they need to do. I've thought a lot about everybody's strengths and what they're good at. Oh, and there will be a lot of overlap. Everyone will be involved in security to some extent. For example, Sandy will need assistance with building things and scavenging materials. Denise will need a lot of help with the food. All the jobs will be a team effort in the end. We'll all just do what we need to do to make this work. Now, Shayla, how about we give you the position of sanitation engineer, because keeping things clean and sanitary and neat will be vital to us moving forward. Do we get paid for these jobs? She asked. Yes, said Gramps. We all get to eat for another day. Speaking of eating, I was thinking about opening a can of those diced jalapenos to go with supper, but I can't find a can opener. I don't think we have one down here. There's one upstairs in the drawer, but not down here. Oh, my, said Gramps. I didn't bring a regular can opener. I didn't even think of it. And we can't go upstairs yet. Not for a few more days, but I know I have some of those military-style can openers, the P-36 or P-38 or whatever. I have a whole baggie of them somewhere here. He got up and started rifling through bins. I wish I'd been a little more organized about all this, he said. Would have made this so much easier. Oh, here they are. He pulled out a Ziploc bag with a bunch of small metal pieces in it. Here's one. You might need help using it. These things work really well, but you do need a little strength in your hand and wrist to make it work. Gramps sat back down in his chair. I'm going to rest just a little bit more, he said. Wake me up if you need help fixing supper. The New World, Chapter 6. Free at last. It's good, Sandy called down. He had carried the dosimeter upstairs to check the radiation. The big day had finally come. After 10 days holed up in the basement, the radiation levels upstairs in the main house had dropped to a point where it was safe to spend a few minutes a day outside the basement. The ones in the basement cheered. Excitedly, the adults came up to grab supplies and just walk around a little. Some tried peeking out the windows, but the plastic sheeting clouded the view so much that nobody could get a good look at anything. The kids went up to grab some toys and coloring books and crayons. Then they ran around laughing and giggling. They were maybe a little too energetic for the more task-minded adults, but nobody complained. Given the circumstances, it was just good to see them running and playing. What about outside? Stevie asked. In 3 to 4 days, said Gramps. We'll check the levels out there. We're safe for a short time each day up here right now because the gamma radiation has decreased to the point where it can't penetrate into the house interior as well. But out there we'll be right on top of the radioactive particles, so it's still dangerous. We'll check in a few days, and eventually the levels will go down to the point that we can go outside." "I can't wait," Sylvia said. "I just want to go for a walk in the sunshine and touch a tree." "There will still be dangers," said Gramps. "The radioactive particles will collect in low spots and in cracks and crevices. Even after it's safe to be outside, there will be places that will be off limits." "It'll be so good just to be out," said Sylvia. "I'm going crazy in this dungeon." Darren spent some time running another antenna wire in the house, hoping to get some better reception on the radio. Michael took a dump on a real toilet. He scooped water out of the bathtub they'd filled on the first day and poured it into the back of the toilet to flush. He emerged from the bathroom with a grin on his face. "No more bucket for me," he exclaimed. Jolene grabbed some books to read to the kids. Denise picked through the drawers and cabinets, grabbing the can opener, some bowls and plates and serving spoons. Ma went hunting for extra blankets and pillows, while Sandy scavenged for batteries and anything else he thought might be useful. After 20 minutes, they all went back downstairs. It was a sad and quiet moment when they retreated to the basement, but the community was full of hope and excitement now, after moving around upstairs and knowing that it was only a matter of days until they might be able to go outside. "I'm going to take a nap," Gramps said, sitting back in his chair. "I'm wiped." Ma patted him on the shoulder. "Get some rest, hon," she said. Darren went right to his radio. He began scanning through the frequencies, stopping to make a note where he found signals that would be interesting to go back to and try to refine. When he was done, he had over 24 good prospects. "These will come in better tonight," he said. "I'm going to stay up and see what I can get from them." "Why didn't you just wait until tonight?" Shayla said mockingly. "Because," Darren replied, "I didn't want to." "That's dumb," she said. "So are you," he snapped back. "I can't wait," said Shayla. I just can't wait to get out of here and leave this clown world." "Leave any time you want," Sandy said. "I'm taking my food with me." "You have no food," Sandy said firmly. "You brought nothing, you contribute next to nothing, so you leave with nothing." "You'll see," she wagged her finger at Sandy. "A lot of this food is rightly mine, and I'm going to take it with me, and you can't stop me. You can't lay a hand on me." "Go ahead and try," Sandy answered her. "The only tear I'll shed is for the bullet I have to waste." "Don't threaten me," said Shayla. "I learned karate when I was a kid, and I could take you out in 2 seconds. Then I'll call the police, and you'll sit in jail the rest of your life." "Police?" asked Michael. "What police?" "The police," she answered. "That's what they're there for, to protect us." Michael shook his head. "There are no police," he said. "Everything is gone. Everything. Everyone is dead." "There must be someone left out there," said Sylvia. "There must be some people who got to shelter like us." "Maybe there are," said Jolene, "but if they don't have food, they're just going to be a part of the zombie horde that wants what we have." "How many people do you think had food and stuff stored up?" asked Denise. "Not a lot," Darren said, looking up from his radio. Really, it was easy enough to see this coming, but nobody wanted to believe it. Nobody wanted to think something like this would happen, even though all the signs were there. "We've got a bunch of food stored up at our place," Sandy said, "but I don't know if we'll ever get back down to South Liberty again to get it, if it hasn't been stolen already." "That would be worth checking on," Michael said, "if it were possible." The group went quiet as they all thought about the changes that had happened in their world. There were places they would never visit again, people they would never see again. Things that were so important to them before seemed trivial now. It was going to be a new world with new rules and new dangers and new priorities. Just a week and a half ago, they were all living their lives and going about their daily routines like the world was forever going to be the same. Now they were huddled in a basement smelling of BO, rotting food scraps and urine, not knowing what was left of their old world. Gramps snorted and gasped, lifting his head up off his chest. Hon, lay your head back, said Ma. You know you can't breathe when you sleep with your head down like that. Yeah, Gramps said groggily. I know. In a few days we can set up that other set of solar panels outside, and maybe that'll give us enough extra power that I can start using the CPAP again. You're going to do that first thing when we get outside, ordered Ma. Nothing else until that's done. I don't need you dying on me now. Oh, chuckled Gramps, don't worry. I intend to hang around a long time and be a thorn in your side. I'm counting on that, old man, she replied. I need you around. We all need you. We all need each other, Gramps said. All of us bring something to the table that we all need. That's what makes us such a strong community. Most of us, anyway, said Sandy, looking sideways at Shayla. The New World, Chapter 7, Voices from Beyond. I got one, Darren exclaimed. It was almost midnight, but everyone who was not asleep sat up, shaking the others awake. They sat, listening intently. Here, Darren said, twisting the volume knob on the radio. The reception is perfect. Enough food. A deep male voice popped from the radio. We've been preparing for this for a long time here in Idaho, but it just doesn't seem real now that it's here. I wish we'd been wrong. I really wish we'd been wrong. I wish everything was back the way it was and everyone was still thinking we were wackos. I was outside for a while again today. There's just so much death everywhere. Most people around here were prepared to some extent, but still, it caught us by surprise. Dead people everywhere, dead cows, dead chickens, dead deer, dead dogs, dead coyotes, just death everywhere. From time to time I meet others. People everywhere are starting to come out of their shelters. One guy said he was going to go back to his shelter and shoot himself. He said he couldn't live in this world. Another guy said he was glad to still be alive, but didn't know how he was going to make it. It was just him and his family. He's got food to make it through the winter, but no idea what he's going to do from there. I told him to come join us, as long as he brings us food and supplies, of course. The more of us there are, the stronger we will be and the better our chances of surviving. There was a little pause. Someone was crying. It sounded like Shayla. It was hard to know in the dark with just one little nightlight and the glow from the screen on the radio. The voice started again. I don't know about everywhere, but I've talked to a few people on shortwave, and it seems to be the same with everyone I talk to. No power, no mobile phones, not even satellite phones are working. No sign of state or federal government. I talked to a guy in Colorado. He said that several convoys seemed to be headed toward the underground bases in the Rockies during the night after the first attack. Here in northern Idaho, I saw a whole fleet of cargo helicopters and a few Apaches heading northwest toward the mountains. That was before the sun even set after the first strike. I talked to one guy in Pennsylvania in the Poconos. He said that from people he's talked to, there's basically nothing left east of the Appalachians. He said there's still smoke almost filling the east sky every day, like the whole East Coast is on fire. He's in a bind. I'm worried for him. His area is being flooded with refugees. He called them zombies because they don't even act or look human anymore. Almost all of them have some stage of radiation sickness. They're overrunning places to get food. The guy's almost used up all his ammo. He and his wife fighting off the swarms. The zombies don't care. They're hungry. They know they're dying anyway, so they just keep coming and coming and coming. All his neighbors are overrun and wiped out. It's just him and his wife and 3 kids. Oh, shit, said Sandy. What are we going to do? Denise asked. Shh, Michael shushed them. Nothing we can do to help them, the voice on the radio said. There was genuine sadness in it. Nothing. It's the same with all the people I talk to on the radio every night. They've all got big problems everywhere, and nothing we can do to help them. We are Americans. We seem programmed to help people in need, to show kindness and sympathy, but now there's nothing we can do. We can barely help ourselves. How are we going to help each other? We've all got our own problems. The realization hit me yesterday. It's all on us. Nobody is coming to help us. There is no rescue. It's all on us now. He paused again, then took a deep breath. Sobering thought. And it's the same for everyone out there. We can't even help each other, except to talk long distance like this. It's a new world out there, and unless we make a way, unless we figure it out, unless we succeed, then our little pockets of survivors will fail and die. Oh, I want to pass this on tonight. I talked to a guy in Eastern California last night. He said he saw Chinese soldiers north of his town yesterday. Not many, just a couple dozen. They came in by helicopter and didn't stick around long. They seemed to be looking for something up in the mountains. I don't know what it all means, or even if the guy was telling the truth. You never know. Oh, hey, I saw the sun for the first time today. I just wanted to pass that on. It's mostly hazy or cloudy, lots of dust up there, I guess, but the whole nuclear winter crap is just a load of bunk. Just something to keep us in fear. Fear, fear, fear. They always fed us something to be afraid of, and it worked really well for them, and, well, until now. Fear is a primal emotion. People who are afraid of something are easy to control, easy to manipulate, easy to exploit. Looking back, they did it so easily. They led this whole country like a hog with a ring in its nose, and here we are. We let it happen. I don't mean to be depressing, just realistic. The old world is gone, and there's a new one now. A hostile, ruthless, dangerous, unforgiving world. I guess it's always been that way. We just covered it up with our artificial world, our fake lives, our bread and circuses, but now all the fakeness has been burned away. Now we stare death right in the eyes. No more curtains, no more smoke and mirrors. I think we'll be okay where we are. Lots of my neighbors had shelters and had put food away. I've checked on some of them already. The zombie hordes won't make it this far from the cities. I hope. I think our biggest problem is going to be ourselves. Lots of people were prepared to some extent, but most are very independent, almost to the point of being arrogant. I don't know how we're going to get everyone to work together to get through this. And then we've got that bunch that didn't put much food away. They said they were just going to pack away guns and ammo and then take what they need when the time comes. Problem for them is most people who put away food also put away plenty of ammo themselves. So when that bunch comes to take their food, there's going to be a fight. People are going to die. This is going to be a problem soon because the ones who only stored up ammo are going to be getting hungry. Some good people, some good families are going to die before we're able to clean up this mess. See, food is the new gold. Food is going to be the currency of the new world for a while. Everyone knows that we all need enough food to make it through until next summer's harvest. We can plant in the spring, or those of us that have seeds can plant in the spring. We still need food to get through to the harvest. Some people won't have enough. Me, I'm set. If someone comes up short, I'd gladly share with them what I can, if they bring a strong back and hands to help work the soil by my side, or if they bring knowledge or information we need. I mean, even a crippled grandma can mend clothes and teach the young'uns to cook and preserve food. The more of us that are working together, the better our chances of survival will be. I don't mean that there won't be any individuals, but I mean that the future, at least the near future, like 5 to 10 years at least, maybe more, the future belongs to communities of individuals who work together for the common survival. The Lone Rangers are, well, mostly going to die off over time. We're going to have to figure out how that will all work, but the Bible says sufficient for today is the evil thereof. We need to get through today and tomorrow and next week before we can afford to start getting philosophical. But the time will come when we'll have to figure out how to build our community and what it's going to look like. All right, gotta go. I've already burned up too much battery talking on this thing today, and the wife is calling me to supper. Talk to you all tomorrow, I hope. The New World, Chapter 8, Invasion. The front door opened and Sandy stepped in. He had a cat that ate the canary grin on his face as he held up the dosimeter. "Today's the day," he exclaimed. Exuberance rippled through the room. "Does that mean we can go outside and play?" asked Timmy. "Well," said Gramps, "it means we can all go outside and move around a little for a few minutes, but, Timmy, there are going to be some rules." "Yay!" cried Sydney, jumping up and down. "Listen, kids," Gramps said. "Stay with your parents all the time and listen to them. Don't go to any low places or ditches or any place like that. That's where all the bad stuff will collect." Okay, said Timmy. "I just want to go out." "I think all of us are ready for that, buddy," said Gramps, "so let's go." One by one, they left the house, pushing aside with one hand the plastic sheeting gasket that hung in front of the door and shielding their eyes with the other hand. It was a bright day, but somewhat hazy. The sky was a dull white color rather than blue. "Oh, it's beautiful," Denise said. The air is so beautiful." They looked around them. About a third of the trees were dead. There were patches of bushes and grass that were brown and dead-looking. It was all very, very quiet. "Ew," said Stevie. "What's that smell?" The others tested the air with their noses. "Smells like something dead," said Darren. "Just when the breeze picks up a little. That's the only time I smell it." "The Kinney farm," Michael cut in. "The breeze is coming from the north. The Kinney farm is about a quarter mile up the road. At the bottom of the hill, you could almost see it, but those trees are in the way." "Something's dead up there," Sandy said. "They have like a couple dozen cows," said Michael. "I bet they don't anymore," Stevie said. "We'll check it out in a couple days," said Gramps. "When we're sure the levels are going down fast enough and we can go outside longer, some of you guys can go up there and check on them." "What's that?" Jolene asked. A low, throbbing sound broke the dead silence of the outdoors. "It's getting louder," Sylvia stated. Darren cocked his head. It's a helicopter," he said. "It's coming from the east, the other side of Lost Man's Ridge." Just moments later, a helicopter emerged over the wooded ridge. I knew it! Shayla shrieked. "They're fixing everything, and it's going back to normal. I can't wait to post all of this online, and good riddance to you lame people." "What the?" Darren said, squinting toward the east. "What is... How?" It's got red markings on the tail. It's like a star with a line through..." "Whoa!" He put his hands down, stepped back. "It's Chinese." The helicopter changed its southwesterly course and began heading straight toward them. "What do we do?" Jolene exclaimed. "Get the kids inside," said Gramps. "Get them into the basement." The ladies heard it and carried the kids quietly into the house. Just as the door closed, the helicopter flew low right over the house. It swiftly banked and circled back over the house again, and then turned to the north. After a short distance, it began lowering itself below the trees, about 2,000 feet up the road. The stressed engine sounds indicated it was landing. "The guns!" shouted Darren, and he moved toward the door as fast as his bad leg would allow. The other men bolted for the house. The sound of the engine was winding down now, finally slowing to silence. A few moments later, the men emerged from the house. Darren and Sandy carried AR-15s. Michael had a 12-gauge. Stevie had a 308 with a nice scope. "It landed up there," Gramps told them. "The farm," Michael said. "It must be at the farm." "Should we get inside the house and stand by the windows?" asked Stevie. "Or hide in the woods behind the trees?" "Why don't two of you go back to the house and stay with the families?" said Gramps. "The other two can go up the road and maybe see what's going on. I'll stay here in the yard just to be the eyes here." Darren and Michael began walking up the road. Sandy and Stevie headed into the house. As Darren and Michael neared the farm, they moved off the road to the tree line about 20 feet away. It ran right along an old stone wall. They crouched and moved as quietly as they could to the last stand of trees. Finally, they knelt on the ground and carefully pulled back a couple branches, peering across the large lawn at the farmhouse. Behind the farmhouse was a large brown barn. Sitting on the front lawn was a largish helicopter. On its tail was the red star and line Darren had spotted earlier. Inside the copter was a pilot. Standing on the lawn in front of it were 3 men, all dressed in drab green camo. 2 helmeted men held AK-47s at ready. The third had a cap on his head and no rifle. He held binoculars to his eyes, looking directly at Michael and Darren. The man with the cap put the binoculars to his side and motioned Michael and Darren to come toward him. "Come, come!" he shouted. The men looked at each other. "Let's do it," said Darren. "Let's see what they want. Seems they would already be shooting if they were hostile." Michael agreed, and the two stood up, still clutching their weapons to them, and began slowly walking towards the helicopter. They stopped about 50 feet away. "No, no," said the man in the cap. "No guns. No, be afraid." He hesitated, then turned and said something in Chinese to the other 2 men. They quickly slung their rifles over their shoulders in obedience. "See, no trick," the man said. "Just talk, no fight." He extended his free hand towards them. Darren and Michael lowered their weapons and began walking toward the helicopter again. They stopped about 10 feet away. "Very good," said the man. "Very good. See, no trick. Sorry, my English not good. Sorry we not come in better time. Better, circumstance." "My name is Darren," Darren said. "This is my brother-in-law, Michael. We live nearby." "Yes, very good, very good. I see you from the air when we fly over. I am Feng. I am from People's Republic of China. Wish we meet in better times, but not today. Bad things happen, and bad things going to happen. I see you from air and want to stop because we not see many people. Most people dead. We see very, very few, but we see you, and I see children. Sad time, though. You lived through all this war, but maybe not longer. America all blown up and burned down. Russia, Europe, all blown up. Middle East, all on fire. China, all blown up. All cities gone. Most leaders gone. Bad men do bad things and destroy the world. We have few resources left. Little petrol, little armies, but we use last of it to hunt down bad people and destroy them for what they did. Bad people think they rule the world. They think people of the world, they're cattle on their plantation for them to milk, for them to harvest. Now they hiding like frightened dogs. Many bad people go underground. We hunt out their bunkers and underground towns and destroy them. We use last of our resources to find and destroy them. This bad for you today. You not bad, Chinese not bad, Russians not bad, English not bad, French not bad, but some people bad, and they think they better than all of us, that they own us, that we are that we their slaves. Some of them hiding underground near here, on other side of town over a river, secret underground retreat between 2 mountains. We destroy it tonight. We drop very big atomic bomb on it tonight. Blow it up. You too close. We sorry, I sorry, but bad people must die. We have nowhere else to go, said Michael. I know, said the Chinese man. I know. Sad times, bad times. Get underground if you can, far as you can, deep as you can. Maybe you survive. Well, thank you for letting us know, said Darren. We will do what we can to save our families. My family, gone, said Feng. My wife, my little boy, gone when Beijing attacked. American missiles hit, everything gone. That why me and these men, we give our lives and use every last resource to hunt down bad people who did this and destroy them. We not stop until they dead or we dead. Fang stood quiet for a moment and then added, You have children with you. Yes, said Darren. 5 of them. Oh, so sorry, Fang said, shaking his head. Bad times. Here. Fang turned and said something in Chinese to the 2 riflemen. The men walked to the helicopter and drew out 3 wooden crates. They brought the crates to Darren and Michael and stacked them on the ground. You have this, said Fang, our gift to you. These are extra. We have plenty for now, but you need. Sorry for bad times. We probably never meet again, but today, we friends. You, me, we. Friends. We must go meet our people. You must go to your families, your children. Hug them, hold them. More bad times come tonight. Sad days. Fang gave more orders to the other 2 soldiers, and they climbed back into the helicopter. Fang climbed into the front and buckled into the seat next to the pilot. He turned one last time to Michael and Darren and waved. Then he leaned over to the pilot and gave some instructions. The pilot jumped to action and fired up the motor. Michael picked up 2 of the crates and Darren grabbed one. They carried them back to the tree line and turned to watch the helicopter lift slowly off the ground. It rose to about 200 feet, then banked and headed south. Once it was off, they turned and carried the crates up the hill toward home, without saying a word to each other. Gramps was still waiting in the yard. What's this? He asked. It's a story, said Darren. Let's go inside and talk about it. Inside, Michael set his 2 crates on the dining room table. He went in his bedroom, came out with a nail puller, which he used to pop off the top of one of the crates. The crate was packed with cans. The labels had only Chinese characters on them, so the contents of the cans were a mystery, but they assumed it was food. Michael pushed the crate aside and opened the second one. It was full of medical supplies, bandages, tape, something that looked like clotting powder, assorted bottles of pills. Most of the pill bottles had English labels as well as Chinese characters. Hey, Sylvia, said Sandy. Come here and take a look at this. See if you can figure out what it all is. All kinds of pills. Just wait there. I'll bring it to you. Sandy grabbed the open crate and carried it down the stairs to the basement. Darren placed the one he was carrying onto the table, and Michael popped the cover off of it. Oh, Michael said. That's what I'm talking about. He reached into the crate and lifted out a large glass bottle with a yellowish liquid inside. I don't know what it is, said Michael. But I know what it is. This is happy juice. I think you're right, said Darren. There's a dozen bottles in here. All the labels are in Chinese, but I bet it's alcoholic. Michael unscrewed the cap from the bottle he was holding and waved the mouth under his nose. Oh, yes. Thank you. He tipped up the bottle and took a little drink off the top. He exclaimed. Oh, that's nasty. Oh, but so good. This is the stuff. He handed the bottle to Darren, who took a small sip for himself. Yep, that's what it is, Darren said. It's like whiskey, but not. Man, it's strong. If we're still alive tomorrow, we're going to celebrate, Michael said, tapping the bottle. Maybe, or we can add these to the medical supplies. Let's get these crates downstairs, said Darren. We need to get things secure and ready before dark. The New World, Chapter 9, Back into Darkness. Daddy, why do we have to go back down there? Nathan clutched his toy monster truck as he stepped down the stairs by Sandy's side. We need to go back down to be safe, his dad responded. There's going to be another big bomb, so we have to go down underground to be safe. Are they going to drop a bomb on us? No, said Sandy. It's being dropped in another town. We'll be safe down here. I'm scared, Daddy, Nathan's voice quivered. Yeah, Sandy comforted him. It's scary for all of us, but we're all together, so we'll be fine. Are my friends safe too? Nathan asked, looking up at his dad. Are they underground too? Mason and Nicole, are they okay? Sandy hesitated and then replied, I don't know, Nate. I don't know. We don't have any way to talk to other people, so we have no way to know where everyone is. Maybe we can go see sometime. Maybe, said Dad. Maybe we can someday. Stevie, Gramps called, did you bring that solar panel in? Yes, I did, Stevie said. It's in the kitchen. Thank you, said Gramps. I don't want to take the chance that it will get damaged tonight. Maybe nothing will happen, Sylvia said. Maybe they'll change their mind. She was handing out potassium iodide to the people in the basement. There are enough hills between us and town. I think we'll be okay, said Darren. Just the ridge alone should deflect that blast enough. It's all just theory until the bomb drops, said Sandy. Yeah, said Darren. It all depends on how big the bomb is. The Americans use smaller bombs but have pinpoint accuracy. The Russians use massive nukes to make up for bad accuracy. I really don't know what the Chinese have. If they drop one like Hiroshima, we'll be just fine. We've got 8 miles in the ridge and several hills between us. But if they drop something bigger, I don't know. Like you said, it's all theory until they drop it. I don't think we should believe that guy anyway, said Shayla. I mean, there's no way the army would let Chinese people in the country. What army? Michael asked her. The Americans, she said, dummy. Listen, Michael blurted out. I don't know why you're not getting this. I don't really care. But there are no police. There is no army. That whole world is gone. You're just stupid, Shayla replied. Stupid. You and your whole family. I can't believe how dumb you are. You just wait until the internet comes back online. Just wait. Then you'll be telling me you're sorry and I was right all along. Michael rolled his eyes. You'll see, Shayla's voice became shrill. You'll see. You guys are just being stupid. When this is over, you will pay big time. Shayla stomped into a corner of the basement and sat down cross-legged and cross-armed, facing the wall. If you're so sure, Michael hollered across the room, then why don't you go out there? Go out there right now and stay out there. Go to someone else's house. Go to a hotel and a restaurant. Go ahead, go. I am going to go, Shayla sobbed. I'm going to go and get the police, and all you are going to pay. But I'm going to go when I want to go, not because you tell me. Michael glanced around the room at the others. I don't know why we have her here, he said. Why is she here? Why is she eating our food? Why are we taking care of her? Why is she our burden? He only takes and takes and takes and makes drama for everyone. She's hopeless. As long as a person still draws breath, said Gramps, there's hope for them. If you say so, said Michael. He plopped down in his chair and grabbed his 12-gauge and a cleaning kit, then began threading a cotton pad through the slot in the cleaning rod. Uh-oh, Gramps exclaimed as he started climbing out of his chair again. What is it, hon? Asked Ma. There's something else we need to do, he replied. He stood, already breathless, and began rummaging through his bins. You have a magic wand in there? Joe asked. No, said Gramps, but it's almost as good. Here. Gramps pulled out a very large Tyvek envelope. I found it. From the envelope, he pulled what looked like a reddish metallic cloth. He handed it to Joe. What's this? She asked. This, said Gramps, is copper cloth. We need to cut off pieces of it to wrap all of our electronics. There's no such thing as metal cloth, said Shayla, her voice dripping with contempt. You guys are nuts. After a short pause, she mumbled to herself, Stupid people. This is a fine copper screen, said Gramps. It's used just like cloth to make RFID protection wallets and small Faraday cages. We've been lucky that most of our electronics still work. But with a blast so close to us tonight, there's no way anything electronic will survive the EMP. Everything we want to keep, the radios, the cell phones, anything, needs to be wrapped in plastic or paper and then wrapped in this copper cloth to protect it from the electromagnetic pulse. I'm not going to wrap my phone because there's no value to it anymore, but I will wrap my tablet because I've saved quite a bit of information on it that might help us going forward. Michael, he continued, do you still have those 2 metal trash cans in the garage? Yeah, Michael answered, I do. Good, said Gramps. Pack them with your power tools, especially the cordless ones, and any other small equipment you think you'll need, and put the lids on as tight as you can. Why especially the cordless ones? Asked Sandy. Because it'll be easier for us to generate DC power than AC, Gramps replied. Stevie, get a Phillips head screwdriver and pull the charge controllers off the solar panels. We'll need to wrap those. The adults busied themselves with finding and protecting as many electronics as they could. The room was quiet that evening except for the whine of the radio as Darren scanned frequencies trying to find somebody from the outside world, before finally packing the radio away and wrapping it in the copper cloth. Everyone kept to themselves, one by one falling asleep in the dim basement. They woke up to the basement shaking like it was coming apart. Things upstairs were smashing to the floor. All around them, cans and jars were tumbling off the shelves onto the floor. The kids began crying, and someone was shrieking. Sandy climbed to his feet, but tumbled on top of Sylvia. The shaking began to subside, just as the rumble of a freight train began outside. The sound grew louder and louder, overwhelming the house as people covered their ears. Then the air grew thin, as if it were being sucked out of the basement. Gramps gasped for breath. Within seconds, air came rushing back in like a strong wind, blowing paper and clothing around the room. The shaking and rumble died down quickly, leaving silence except for crying children. Shayla began wailing in her corner. Finally, someone spoke. What was that? Stevie said, although he knew what it was. Gramps' chest was heaving. He lifted his hand like he was going to say something, but sat back down in his chair instead. That was a big one, said Denise. Stay where you are, kids, said Ma as she began picking up cans from the floor and sweeping broken glass. We sure lost some food here. I'm going to check it out, Sandy said. Can't you wait? Sylvia asked. Please? It's so dark. Sandy grabbed a flashlight and headed up the stairs. Darren did the same. We need to see what we're dealing with, Sandy said, climbing the stairs. The mothers settled the children, and the other adults helped clean up the mess in the basement as Sandy and Darren disappeared into the darkness. The New World, Chapter 10, The Day After, Again. Wow, said Sandy. The windows on the front of the house were shattered, and the plastic on most of them was torn. Beyond the windows, outside, they saw a massive orange glow over the ridge. Darren walked back to the basement steps and called down to the others. Stevie, Michael, he said, we need your help. We need to redo the plastic on a lot of the windows. Oh, my, said Gramps, we need to get that done fast. Are we going to be okay? Denise asked. We'll see, Gramps answered. We're very close to ground zero, only a few miles away. The prevailing winds are in our favor and should carry most of the radioactive particles away to the east, but we'll still get something being this close. We'll need to be in the basement for another 2 weeks. Of course we will, Shayla groaned. We lost some food, said Ma. 3 quarts of chicken, 2 pints of chili, and a pint of carrots. Food is going to be a problem, said Gramps, shaking his head. We can't plant anything until late spring and can't harvest until summer and fall. We need food to get through until then. Denise, when we get out of this basement again, can you help me inventory all our food and try to figure out how many days we have? Yeah, said Denise. I mean, I might need some help, but I'll do my best. Thank you, said Gramps. It looks like food is going to be our biggest problem. If we make everything else work, but run out of food, our goose is cooked. I wish we could just go back for one day and buy up all the canned goods at the grocery store. It's too late for that now. We probably have more food than most people right now, but still, I doubt it's enough to get us all through until next summer. Even then, it's going to be harder than we think to actually grow enough food to feed us all through next winter. Without the right tools and just the seeds I put away, I put away enough for Ma and me. I never considered needing to feed a larger group. I think, said Jolene, that we all would have done things differently if we'd known this was coming. It would have been so easy to prepare then. Now it's too late. Michael had come down the steps to grab a roll of duct tape. It's going to come down to what a person brings to the table, he said, looking over at Shayla. She scowled back at him. How's it going up there? Gramps asked. Not too bad, answered Michael. We'll have it all sealed up in about 10 minutes. He took off back up the steps. Oh, he's right in a way, said Gramps. It will come down to what we all bring to the table, what we offer the community, but even then, it's hard. Most everyone here brings something important. Sylvia brings her medical knowledge. Sandy is the expert at building anything. Joe takes care of the kids, plus she can organize and plan anything. Darren is definitely our security guy, and he knows the shortwave and has a strong back for any kind of labor. Denise can cook anything from scratch. She's our food person. Michael is our hunter. Stevie is young and strong and can learn anything we might need him for. Ma has the wisdom of a lifetime and can cook and preserve food and do whatever needs to be done without complaining. And me, well, I'm good at holding chairs down, which is important because we don't want to lose our chairs. Oh, said Shayla sarcastically, so I'm not good at anything? I'm useless? We just don't know you as well, said Gramps. I'm sure as we get to know more about you, we'll learn your strengths and weaknesses. Anyway, we have a decent community here. We've got a good chance. We just need to figure some things out. We have such a variety of skills and resources that we all bring to the table. We have a fighting chance. What about the brats? Said Shayla, pointing at the kids who were coloring with crayons and coloring books on the floor. They don't bring anything. They're not good at anything. Those kids, said Gramps, are our future. Our most important job is to teach them everything we know and to make sure they are better at us at everything. One day, all the adults in this room will be old, and these kids will be the strong young minds and backs who are the powerhouse of our community. What about you? Shayla asked. What you bring to the table? I mean, other than the food, but we have that now. So why keep you around? You're not good for anything. You're just a burden. Oh, you're partly right about that, Gramps nodded. Don't talk like that, said Ma, thumping Gramps on the shoulder. Oh, but she is partly correct. There are a lot of things I cannot do, and my usefulness will fade a little every day, but for now, I have some useful knowledge to pass on. I know how to preserve just about any kind of food we can get a hold of. I know a little about the challenges we're facing. I know a lot about the old-timers and how they did things and made things before they had electricity and long supply chains. I can grow food and know how to put it up for future use and how to save seeds for the next harvest. I can make soap. I know enough about electronics to do basic repairs, and when we finally get out of this basement, I'm going to set up a system with the batteries and solar panels to not just charge the radios and run my CPAP, but I'm going to get the well pump running off of it and start pulling up clean water for us from underground. Yeah, I'm fading, but I've still got a few tricks to turn. And, said Ma, you're going to be around for a long, long time to do all this stuff. We need you just as much as we need anyone else." "Joe can sew," said Denise. "That'll be helpful." "Yeah, good point," said Gramps. I'm sure we'll all need clothing mended, and I know that we're going to need a lot of blankets and quilts for the winter. Every scrap of cloth has to be saved for quilt making." "And," Denise continued, "Michael can do just about anything with sheet metal and iron, and Sylvia would be a great teacher for the kids." "We've got a really great group of skills here," Gramps nodded. "If we work together, solve some problems, stay focused, have a little good luck and some blessing from God, we've got a good chance to build a life for these children here and the children to come." "No offense," said Shayla, "but I really don't give a flip about the future for the kids. They aren't my kids, so why should I care? I want something good for myself. I want to get out of this hole and get back to civilization. There's still people out there living a normal life, and I'm going to find them." "You're free to do that," Gramps said. I don't think you'll like what you find, but I'm sure there are still some people alive out there somewhere, maybe even more than we expect, but we can be pretty sure that nobody out there is living a normal life. Right now, for most people, it's going to be the same as us. How do we create food? How do we survive until we can start creating it? And how do we stay warm this winter? "When all this started," said Joe, "I was really sad. I was depressed. Losing our old life was like friend dying. But now it's different. Now it's more like, let's get this job done, and let's do something for these kids." "I think," said Gramps, "that all of us went through some grief. We lost our old lives. We've been handed a very difficult, very different, and very uncomfortable situation. We all grieved our loss. Survival isn't just a matter of meeting our physical needs. Survival is 90% mental. We definitely need to solve some physical problems, but most of our survival will depend on how we mentally and emotionally adapt to our new situation. That means we need to find ways to cope and find ways to have fun and decompress. Look at those children there coloring." Gramps waved his hand towards the kids. "They have adapted better than any of us. And that's good. This is their new world. What we do for them. But to make it work, we need to adapt as well as they do." The four men came back down the steps. "It's all set," Sandy said. "We got everything patched up." "Oh, here goes 2 more weeks," Gramps sighed. The New World, Chapter 11. More changes. The next morning was a gloomy one. The prospect of 2 more weeks in the basement, after being teased by 30 minutes outside the house, was almost unbearable. Darren was up first. He usually had coffee with Gramps first thing, but Gramps was sleeping in. Trying to move around quietly so as not to wake the others, he got water and the jar of instant coffee to mix his morning cup. It had been so nice fixing real hot coffee for the few days they were upstairs, but cold instant coffee was better than nothing. He sat on the edge of his mattress with his cup and pulled out his notebook, sifting through the list of frequencies and notes to figure out which ones to listen on today. The others awakened one by one and moved through their morning routines in silence. The hope that they had felt 24 hours earlier had faded considerably. Ma fixed cold oatmeal for everyone, handing it out in bowls to each. "Time for Gramps to get up and start his day," she said. "Gramps, get your oatmeal before I put it away." He didn't stir, so she walked across the room to him. "Oh, hon," she said, "you know you can't sleep with your head down like that. Come on, hon, come on, let's get up." She put her hand on his face to lift his chin off his chest, but quickly pulled it away with a gasp. "What's wrong, Ma?" said Jolene. Joe picked up the kids' bowls and headed toward the dirty dishes bin. He's cold," Ma choked. Sylvia jumped up and scrambled across the room to Gramps' chair. She put her hand on his forehead, then 2 fingers on his neck, then finally held the back of her hand under his nose. Her face was pale, and her voice unsteady as she spoke to Ma. He's gone, she said. Ma, he's gone. Ma broke down in tears. The other adults stood and walked over, some putting their arms around Ma and others standing next to Gramps' chair. I can't believe it, Sandy said, shaking his head. Oh, Ma, Stevie exclaimed. That's sad, said Shayla, but every cloud has a shiny inside. We won't go through as much food, and he didn't do that much work anyway. He just talked most of the time. Michael's face turned red and his eyes bulged. He clenched his fist tightly and turned to Shayla. Michael, said Denise, placing her hand on his shoulder. Dear, not now. Not now. This isn't the time. Michael turned around to face Denise, anger in his eyes and tears in his face. It's only a matter of time, he said to her. You know that. We only held back because of him. He lifted a hand towards Gramps' chair. Now there's no reason to hold back anymore. He's got a point there, said Sandy. Just not now, Denise pleaded. This isn't the time. Let's just deal with this right now. Okay, Michael said. For now. Bitch, Shayla muttered as she sat down on her mattress. Michael tensed up and tilted his head. Buddy, don't, said Sandy. Your wife is right. This isn't the time. We need to deal with this right now. What are we going to do? Sylvia asked as she choked back tears. First, said Darren, we need to get the body out of here. Where to? Joe asked. Us guys will take it upstairs and put it on that bench by the back door. As soon as we're able to go outside again, we can take it out and bury it. Then we can have some sort of funeral. That's just creepy, said Sylvia, just knowing his body is upstairs. Yeah, said Sandy, but we've got to get it out of here, and we can't go outside yet. I know, she replied. I just wish there was something else we could do. For now, said Darren, this is it. It took all 4 men to wrestle Gramps' large body up the stairs. Once up the steps, they carried it to the back door and laid it across the bench. Here, said Sylvia, coming up behind them. She handed them a sheet. It's just not right to leave him here like an old piece of furniture. At least put this sheet over him. Michael and Stevie spread the sheet out and draped it over his body. Come on, said Darren. We need to get back downstairs. The radiation is just way too high for us to stay up here. The others nodded and followed him back into the basement. The New World, Chapter 12. Life Goes On. 2 weeks went by slowly. There was little talking, and the mood was dark. Finally, the day came when they were able to go upstairs and, later, start spending some limited time outside. As soon as they could get outside, the men moved Gramps' body to the garage, and Michael and Sandy began digging a grave. The cold weather had worked in their favor, but the decomposing body was beginning to stink. With the limited time, they were able to be outside at first. It took about 3 days to dig the hole. On the 4th day, Michael and Stevie went to the grave to plant a headboard into which Michael had carved Gramps' name and dates. We'll do a real funeral, Michael said, next week when we can stay out here longer. It's so different without him, Stevie said. Yeah, nodded Michael. It seems like everything is different. It just seems like I'm going through the motions every day, and Ma hardly says anything anymore. What's that? Stevie said, pointing down the road. Michael looked. There was movement on the road, through the trees to the south of the driveway. I see it. Is it a deer? No, Stevie exclaimed. It's a person. 2 people. 3. Look through the trees behind them. Hey, hey, Shayla was shouting in the front yard. It's people! It's people! What a tard, Michael mumbled. He picked up his shotgun from a nearby tree and headed down the driveway. As he got closer to the road, he could now clearly see 3 men walking down the road. They were unshaven and their clothes were torn and dirty. Hello there, said Michael, stopping at the end of the driveway. Stevie stepped up next to him and Shayla ran up to join them. We're rescued, Shayla shouted. Yay, we're finally rescued! Real people! Hey, bud, one of the men said. We sure didn't expect to find people alive up here. Yeah, said Michael, we're alive. I don't know why, but we're alive. I think I've seen you around, the man said, before all this. My name is Matt. This is my brother Lucas, and there's my brother Johnny. We live a couple miles down the road at Ma and Pa's place. Well, I guess it's our place now. They didn't make it through the first week. The three men had stopped about 6 feet away. How many are you? Matt asked, smiling. Only a few of us, Michael said. 14 of us if you count the kids, said Shayla. Well, there, said the friendly man. That's quite a crowd. We sure didn't expect to find that many around here. Michael looked at Shayla sideways, then turned back to the men. It's been rough, Michael said. Not everyone made it. Just buried one today. Oh, I am sorry, Matt said. Seems most people didn't make it. We've run into a few going south. They say there are more down by town, but still, most people didn't make it. And that last one a couple weeks ago caught us all by surprise. Matt shook his head. I didn't expect anyone up to the north side here. Say, there's word that every Saturday a bunch gets together down by Sandy Bend to trade things. Right there by the town office. Figured I'd let you know in case you have things to trade. Well, said Michael, we don't really have a lot to trade right now, but that's good to know. I might go down there and check it out. We've got a ton of food, Shayla said. Lucas and Johnny looked at each other. Well, you know, Matt said, if you want to trade some of that, we'd be the first in line to get some. There's not much around here right now. Hey, Matt reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of $20 bills. We'd be glad to pay top dollar for a little of that food. I'll talk to the others, said Michael, but we really don't have much to spare right now. Don't be an ass, Michael, Shayla said. We've got a bunch of food, and he's offering us hundreds of dollars for just a little bit. Shayla, Michael said, trying to be patient for the benefit of the visitors. We might not even have enough food for the winter, and you can't eat dollar bills. I understand, Matt said, stuffing the money back into his pocket. I sure understand, and I don't blame you, friend. I wouldn't sell food for money either, but fellas gotta try. Tell you what, you talk to your friends, and if you change your mind, just pop over and see us. We're about 2 miles down the road here, big gray house on the right. If you want to part with some of that food, I'm sure we could come to an agreement of some sorts. We got a fair amount of stuff to trade. I'm sure we have something you might want. I'll do that, Michael said. I'll talk to the others and see what they want. It's been really nice chatting, Matt said. So glad to meet you. Best of luck, and don't forget, if you want to do a little trade, pop over and see us anytime, day or night. We even have a 6-pack of beer we're saving for the right time, so we can have a drink to seal the deal. Just come on down. Matt reached out his hand toward Michael. Michael stepped forward and shook his hand. Then Matt shook with Stevie and Shayla. Good meeting you, said Michael. Best of luck to you, too. The three men turned and walked back in the direction they came from. Michael stood and watched until they were out of sight. You're an idiot, said Shayla. All that money for just a little food, and you said no? Michael ignored her and turned back to the house. Sandy and Darren were waiting inside at the windows, guns in hand. What was all that about? Darren asked. They're from down the road, Michael answered. They're looking for food and things to trade. It didn't feel right, so I was polite to them and nice and all, but didn't feel right making a deal. At least they don't know what we have, Darren nodded, looking back out the window again. Well, Michael said, about that. There was a blabbermouth there who told them that we have tons of food. Sandy and Darren looked alarmed. Well, said Shayla, we do have tons of food, and they have stuff we can trade it for. Why do you guys always have to be so suspicious and so judgmental and so paranoid all the time? We finally met some people, real people, and they had money, and they just wanted to be friends, and this jackass, she pointed to Michael, was all just, yeah, go away. I just can't believe how stupid you are. Shayla, said Sandy. "You've just put every life in this house at risk." "You people!" she said, and she stomped off down the cellar steps. "There was one interesting thing they told us," Michael said. "Matt, the brother that did all the talking, he said that there are more people south toward town. He said most people didn't make it, but there are still quite a few down by town. He said they come together at the town office on Saturdays to trade. Maybe we should show up there sometime and see just what's going on. Maybe get some news? Maybe someone down there has food to trade?" Darren nodded. "When we can start spending all day outside, we should do that, just to get some intelligence and see what's going on out there." The New World, Chapter 13. Oh dear. The next 2 weeks were gloomy ones. Gramps was gone. The adults were anxious about the neighbors they had met. The sky was cold and gray every day, without even a glimpse of sunshine. Colder weather had brought with it colds and coughs that managed to make people just a little more miserable. At least now they were able to spend days outside, and there was plenty of work to do to keep people busy. Stevie and Michael worked on getting together some firewood for the coming winter. There were plenty of dead trees and blowdowns to choose from. It was just a matter of the strenuous work of chopping and cutting, something they weren't accustomed to after so much time spent in the basement and bound to the house. Sandy's time was consumed with numerous repair projects on the house and garage, trying to fix things up and winterize the home. Darren monitored the shortwave and then went back and forth between helping Sandy and helping Michael and Stevie. Ma and Denise worked on finding ways to stretch meals, to wash clothes without soap, and to figure out sleeping arrangements so that each family in the group could have some space to themselves. Joe and Sylvia took care of the kids, starting a makeshift school program to teach the children. Shayla did little, except to point out what people were doing wrong. She pictured herself as a sort of foreman, trying to manage the work of everyone else when she wasn't napping or chewing somebody's ear off. She was especially good at coming up with not-so-creative insults for Michael. One brisk morning, Michael got up before the sun. He started a small fire in the wood stove to take the chill off, then sat down to have hot coffee with Darren. "What are you up to today?" Darren asked, sipping coffee. "Today," said Michael, "I'm hunting. I saw a deer yesterday when the sun was going down. It was by the crabapple trees up at the top of the hill behind the house. Just a little spike horn, but it sure would be good to have some fresh meat. I'm tired of canned chicken and Spam." "Oh, yeah," Darren nodded. "A nice tender deer steak, cooked with onions and potatoes. Maybe some gravy over those potatoes." He closed his eyes and shook his head. "It's been so long it seems like a dream." "I'm going to find him," Michael said. "I'm going up the hill, and hopefully he's still hanging around in the area. He's little, but he's the only one I've seen since all of this." "I suppose a lot of them died," Darren said. "Yeah," Michael agreed. "Too bad, too. We could use 3 or 4 for the winter." "How would we keep them?" Darren asked. "There's no electricity." "The old-timers," Michael said, "used to dress them out and hang them in the meat shed, late October or November. And then they'd eat off of them all winter. My dad told me about it, how his dad's family would do that on the farm. They'd put a couple deer and maybe a beef animal and some sausage patties packed in crocks every fall, and they would stay below freezing most of the time so it would keep. By the time weather warmed up in the spring, the meat would be pretty much gone anyway." "Wow," Darren said, nodding. "There's so much about how that generation lived that I wish we knew now. Everything done without modern conveniences and mostly with our own resources. Sure would be nice to know all of that now." "We've lost a lot," Michael agreed. "I used to think that we'd got far ahead in the modern world, but now I see how much we lost. So much knowledge, just gone. Stuff that would save our lives now. The men finished their coffee as a faint glow began to grow in the east. "I'm off now," Michael said. "I want to get to the top of the hill before there's much sunlight, if you can call it sunlight." He picked up a 308 and a closed travel mug with extra coffee and slipped quietly out the door. Michael climbed the small hill behind the house and sat down next to a rock. He scanned the woods on the backside of the hill. There was nothing, so he lay his rifle across his lap and opened the coffee, taking a small sip. There was something relaxing about sitting there alone in the woods. He loved his extended family, but after spending so much time in close quarters, it seemed like such a luxury to be sitting alone in silence. Sitting by the rock in the woods, sipping hot coffee, he could almost imagine that everything that had happened was nothing more than a dream, and the world was back the way it used to be. There was a rustling in the leaves. Michael peered through the woods again. A squirrel ran from one tree and up another. He sat back again. He remembered sitting in the living room playing his wrestling game on his Xbox, a beer on one side of him and a bowl of popcorn on the other, and his little girl on his lap. He smiled. The memory didn't seem real. It was from some old distant life. The feelings were real. He wiped a tear from his eye. What kind of world would Afton be growing up in now? Michael was a big man. He was over 6 feet tall, and his biceps were as big as most people's thighs, but he felt so small and helpless. A twig snapped. He shook himself out of his daydream and peered through the leafless trees again. His heart beat faster. There it was! A little spike-horn white-tailed deer was walking through the woods about 100 feet away. The deer stopped and looked around, then put its head down and nuzzled the ground. Michael slowly lifted his rifle to his shoulder. With his thumb, he flicked the safety off. He looked intently through the scope. With the crosshairs on the animal's upper chest, he drew a deep breath, then exhaled. The rifle cracked and punched his shoulder. The buck jumped up and sprinted about 20 feet. Then its front legs collapsed and it tumbled to the ground, motionless. Michael jumped to his feet and ran to the deer, stumbling over a pile of small rocks, but staying on his feet. He reached the deer and looked at it. It was still motionless, its dark, lifeless eyes staring at the sky. Excited, he pulled out his buck knife and cut the hide right down the center of its belly, being careful not to cut into the abdominal sac. Reaching deep into the carcass, he skillfully cut the esophagus where it came down the neck, then cut the rear end of the large intestines where it connected to the anus. Carefully but deliberately, he slid the gut sac out of the deer and onto the ground. Then he went to work removing the lungs and the heart. Darren came up behind him. "Hey," he said, "you got it." "Yeah," said Michael, standing up and beaming with pride and excitement. "Want to help me get it down to the house? I'm not going to mess with the liver and heart. I just don't know if the organ meats are safe to eat under the circumstances. I don't know if any of it's safe to eat, but I'm having me a steak." Darren and Michael each grabbed one of the hind legs and dragged the deer up and over the little hill. Others were coming out of the house now, stirred by the sound of the gunshot. "A deer! A deer!" Timmy cried out, running up the hill to meet his father and Michael. "Real food!" Denise exclaimed. When they reached the house, they put the deer down. "Usually," said Michael, "I would hang the guy for 3 days. But I want steak. I'm cutting it up this morning." Over the next 2 hours, he skinned the deer and worked at separating the different cuts of meat. He was careful to get every scrap of meat, even what wasn't good for roast or steak, would be boiled down in a stew. Most of the meat was wrapped in sheets of paper and put in a crate in the garage, where it'd be left to chill and to freeze. Ma set up Gramps' pressure canner on the wood stove and canned the stew meat. Then she sent Michael back out with a saw to cut up the bones, which she boiled in batches to make broth. "We'll can the broth, too," she said. "That'll make some nice stew this winter." The group used much more precious firewood than usual that day, but the warmth and joy they felt was unmatched by anything they'd experienced since that day the world changed. At the end of the joyous day, after the children were put to bed, Michael went into the basement to the case of Chinese wine. He pulled out a bottle and took it upstairs. "Tonight," he said to the others, "we celebrate." The New World, Chapter 14. Turning Point. The front door opened and Shayla came in. Darren turned and looked, then went back to work. "Thought you were leaving," he said sarcastically. He sorted through some odds and ends of various wires, not noticing that 3 other figures slipped in behind her. "Who's that, Daddy?" said Sydney. Darren looked up to see 3 men. It was the McSpaddens from down the road. They lined up along the front wall, each with a rifle or shotgun. "I've come for my food," said Shayla. "I want it all right now, and nobody will get hurt. And the booze, too." "Shayla," said Darren, "you need to leave. Now." "No!" she shrieked. "No! I want the food. All of it. Right now. Or we start shooting people. Michael, Sandy, get your asses up here and bring the food now." "You need to leave," Darren said. Shayla screamed, cutting Darren's words off. "Now! Now! I told you that you would regret being mean to me. Get the food now! I'm not going to say it again, freak." There was a tense moment as Darren and the McSpaddens stared at each other like some kind of Old West standoff. Darren stepped back as if giving up. But in a sudden and swift movement, he leapt to his left, drawing his .45 as he crouched to the floor. 2 shots fired off, and Johnny McSpadden slumped backwards against the wall, then to the floor. Darren pivoted towards Lucas as the other 2 brothers, stunned, lifted their firearms to their shoulders. Lucas fired without aiming as Darren shot him in the chest. Matt McSpadden fired twice at Darren. There was an explosion at the back of the room, and Matt was flung backwards against the wall and fell to the floor, blood spurting from his neck and chest. Darren looked over his shoulder to see Michael standing in the doorway to his bedroom with his 12-gauge at his shoulder. Cautiously, Darren stood up, covering the 3 bodies with his handgun. Michael moved quickly across the room and approached the McSpaddens. They didn't move. "I think they're all dead," Michael said. Darren turned to Shayla, who was curled up in a ball on the floor, whimpering, with her hands over her ears. Suddenly there was a ghastly moan behind him. He turned around. Joe was kneeling at the top of the basement steps, clutching a motionless, bleeding Sydney to her breast. Sylvia ran up to check him. She gasped and touched a wound on the side of his head and started crying. Darren went to Joe and put his arms around her. Sandy was up the stairs now with a rifle in his hands. He looked around at the carnage. "What happened?" he asked. Michael turned to Shayla, who was still whimpering on the floor, and pointed at her. "Her," he said, with barely controlled anger. "It was her. I am going to kill her." "Wait, what?" Sandy asked, confused. Michael took a deep breath. "She brought those guys here to take our food," he said. "She got the boy killed. Her." "We need to have a meeting," said Sandy. "Shayla, you're coming with me. Get up off that floor and come." Shayla slowly began to rise, but Sandy grabbed her by her arm and yanked her to her feet. He practically dragged her to the bathroom, shutting her in. "If you open this door," he said, "I'm going to beat the shit out of you." Sandy walked back to the front room. Ma joined him and Michael. Darren, Sandy said, we need you over here. I know you have things to deal with there, but we need you for a minute. Darren got up just as Denise came up the steps and joined them. We need to decide what to do, said Sandy. What do we do with her? We should send her away, said Ma. Nobody wants her here anymore. Send her away, said Michael. So she can find more idiots and do this all over again? He's got a point, said Denise. She will just find more people and try to steal or take our food again. She knows everything we have and how many of us there are and how many guns we have and how much food we have. She knows everything. And there are probably a lot of people who'd like to use her to get what we have. Then, said Ma, we need to keep her here. Keep her tied up or locked up. Maybe we can change her in time. Gramps said that there was hope for everyone as long as they're still breathing. You see where that got us, said Sandy. We gave her a chance, and now that kid there ain't breathing. Michael cleared his throat. We can't send her away, he said, because she'll just find someone else to take our stuff. And if she stays, we can't watch her 24/7, and she doesn't deserve our time and food anyway. That only leaves one thing. The group was quiet. Then Darren spoke softly. I'll do it. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Okay, man, said Michael. If you don't want to do it, I will. But it's right for you to do it if you want to. I'll do it, Darren said again. Anyone against it? He looked at the somber faces. Nobody said anything. Darren turned and walked to the back of the house. The group listened as the door to the bathroom opened. They heard Shayla shouting. You can't treat me like this, she yelled. I'm a free person, and you can't keep me locked up in here like an animal. What do you do? She screamed, but the scream was cut short by the crack of a .45. One shot, followed by a dull thump. Nobody said a thing as Darren came back out. He knelt down with his wife and his dead son, embracing her, and lowered his head. The New World, Chapter 15, A New World Order. Where's Stevie? Ma asked, alarmed. He must be here somewhere, Denise said. Michael scanned the room. Well, he said, he was out cutting some of the blowdowns for firewood this morning. I didn't see him come back. Where was he cutting? Sandy asked. Down the hill on the south side, said Michael. In the direction of the McSpadden's place? Said Sandy. Everybody in the room had the same thought at the same time. We need to check him out, Ma exclaimed. Yeah, said Michael, picking up his 12-gauge again. I'll go. How many McSpadden boys were there? Sandy asked. Only 3, said Michael, that I've seen. So we don't know, Sandy said. Then we both go. I'll go too, Darren said, standing up. We don't know, so we need to assume there are more. Michael, Sandy, and Darren headed out the door, each holding their firearm at ready. Michael and Sandy hustled down the hill toward the south side of the house. Hold up, guys, Darren said. They stopped. If there are more thugs, they may already know we're coming. There may be some kind of trap. We need to be cautious and methodical. Michael, where was he cutting wood? Down that way, said Michael, pointing to the south. Only about 1,000 feet, maybe a little more, right near the road, right where all those maples were down. Darren nodded and peered down the road, then scanned the tree line across the whole south side. Okay, he said, let's go up that way to the southwest. That way, if they're down in there, we can come up from their west flank and have some advantage that way. We'll get up there and spread out about 100 feet apart, then slow walk towards the road. The others nodded, and the 3 men moved swiftly but cautiously to the tree line on the southwest. They went about 600 feet into the woods, then spread out and worked their way methodically toward the road, peering into the woods in front of them for any sign of life or movement. The three emerged at the roadside without incident. Darren motioned them to him. "Where was he cutting?" he asked. "Right down here," Michael said, pointing to some downed trees by the road, about 150 feet to the south. The three moved to the spot Michael had pointed out. "Here," said Michael, "look, his tools." Laying in the leaves near one of the trees were an axe and a bow saw. "Hang here for a minute," said Darren. He slipped back into the trees toward the west, emerging about 5 minutes later a few hundred feet down the road. He walked quickly back to the other two. "There's nobody," he said. "Nothing. No one out there." "Where did the kid go?" Sandy asked. "We need to search every square inch. He's got to be here," said Michael. The three men spread out again and walked slowly through the area, moving about 200 feet back into the trees as they went. They searched thoroughly, but when they met back up by the road, they had found nothing. "I didn't even see a footprint," said Sandy, "except a couple of ours." "How far away is the McSpadden's house?" Darren asked Michael. "A couple miles," Michael answered. "It's a good walk. I don't know why he would go there, though." "Maybe it wasn't his decision," Darren observed. "But let's look around here some more first. Let's look across the road." "But that just drops off in the swamp over there," Michael said. "If he was over there, wouldn't he have heard or seen us by now?" "If he were able," said Darren. Michael looked alarmed. He hurried across the road with the other two behind him. He stopped at the top of the steep embankment where the roadside fell about 15 feet down into a wet, swampy area. "It's just swamp over here," he said. "I don't see any—" His words trailed off as he peered into the swamp. His face was pale. "There." He pointed just a little to the north. "I think I see something." Michael handed his shotgun to Sandy and slid down the embankment. Carefully, he picked his way through the water. It was only waist deep at its deepest, but hard to see the bottom to know where his footing was. It took about half a minute for him to wade out to the spot, where a small nub rose up out of the water, covered with scrubby brush. On the rise, only head and shoulders above water, lay a motionless body, face covered in blood. Michael surged ahead to his little brother. He bent over and picked the body up, hefting it onto his shoulders, and fireman Carey style walked him out of the water. He struggled up the bank and laid Stevie down by the road. Darren and Sandy joined him. "He's breathing!" Michael exclaimed. The left side of Stevie's face was bruised and bloodied. His left eye was swollen shut. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, and his ankles were zip-tied together. "We got to get him back to the house," Michael said. "I'll carry him." Michael hefted Stevie back onto his shoulders and headed up the road toward the house, with Sandy and Darren right behind him. As they reached the house, Sandy ran ahead and opened the door for Michael. Michael stepped in and went right to the living room, laying Stevie out on the couch. One of the ladies gasped. "No, no, no, no," Ma wailed. I can't do this anymore." Sylvia hurried to the couch and began checking her brother over. "Hey," said Sandy to Michael, "let's let her take care of this. We need to get those bodies out of here." Michael nodded, and the three men went back to the front of the house. Ma and Denise took the children down into the basement. One by one, the men hauled out the three McSpaddens. Then they came back and pulled Shayla's body out of the bathroom and took it outside. "Okay," Sandy said, "now we've got to talk. Listen, we can't keep going like this. We need some kind of organization and planning, or this is just going to happen again and again. If we had pulled things together before now, maybe things wouldn't have gone down the way they did." Michael nodded. "Look," Sandy continued, "those guys didn't just plan to take our food and go home. They knew what they were doing when they tied up Stevie and threw him in the swamp. They had bad intentions, more than just stealing stuff from us. And if they hadn't been the village idiots, it might have worked for them. What if next time somebody tries to pull this off who has an IQ bigger than their shoe size? What do you have in mind? Darren asked. Rules, said Sandy. Organization, planning, leadership. We're in this for the long term now, so we need to be organized if we're going to survive. I'm tired of things just happening to us. I know we don't have a lot of control, but we can control some things. It's time to stop being reactive and start being preemptive. I'm all for that, said Darren. Yeah, Michael agreed. Sounds good. How do we do it? Well, here's what I'm thinking, Sandy explained. We need to all have formal duties, and one of us needs to be an overall leader who can oversee everything and lead in the planning and in following the plan. And they can be a judge if we have disputes in the group, so if we get another Shayla situation, maybe it can be resolved before it comes to something like this. Everyone can take a turn at leading, so that it's all fair. Maybe do 1 month or 3-month terms, whatever. Why don't you go first, said Michael. Sounds good, Darren said. We'll run it by the others, and if we're all agreed, we can begin right now. The sooner we get some organization, the better. I'll do it, said Sandy. Darren, if we start this new order of things, I'd ask you to formally be our security person. We need a plan and rules to help avoid surprises like this, and things like nobody goes off to work alone. We should have known better than to let Stevie go out by himself. We've been lazy about the reality of this world, and it's cost us. Not a problem, Darren said. I'll start working on a plan tonight. We also need to do a funeral. So we need to pick a spot to set aside as a graveyard, probably right next to Gramps. Good idea, said Michael. But those guys out there ain't getting no funeral. We're going to drag them down the road to the Kenny farm and let the coyotes take care of the rest. I don't think anyone will object to that, Sandy nodded. Michael, see if Denise will go through all those bins of Gramps' stuff and see what's there and what we can use. You can ask Ma first, but I don't think she's going to mind. Yeah, Michael said. No problem. Sandy sighed. Let's do this, he said. I'll run it by the others. If everyone is together on this, we'll get it rolling. The New World, Chapter 16. New Purpose for a New World. What's it even matter anymore, Michael said. What do you mean, asked Ma. It's just no use anymore. Everything is gone, and now Dad is gone, and Sid is gone. There's no point anymore. No point to living, no point to anything. That's where you're wrong, Michael, said Ma. Yes, everything has changed. We can't bring anything back. We can't bring anyone back. But, Michael, listen to me. Understand this, because it's the most important thing for you to understand. It's not about us anymore. Nothing is about us anymore. Look. Ma pointed to little Afton curled up with a doll, sleeping on the couch. Look, she said, everything we do from here forward is about them. It's about teaching them and helping them learn how to survive in this new world. Our world is gone, and it's never coming back. But this, she pointed out the window, this, she said, is their world. And we need to equip them to survive in it. We need to make some pathways for them, make some models for them, figure some things out for them. We need to teach them skills and attitudes. Our whole existence right now is to work as hard as we can to give them what they need to move forward and live, and maybe even prosper and be happy in their world. This is what we are about. Oh, why can't we just go back, Michael said. He laid his head on Ma's chest, and his voice began breaking up as he fought his tears. Why can't we just go back? We just can't, Ma said. It's the way of life. We don't appreciate what we have until we don't have it. And then it's too late to appreciate. I wish I had hugged Sid more. I wish I'd played with him. I wish I had sat and just talked with your dad a couple more times or played cards with him or anything. They're gone now, and it's too late. Just like the old world is dead now. Our lives are dead now, our old lives. And here we are. So now, let's just try to appreciate what we have now while we still have it, because one day we won't even have this. In the old days, they knew death. Death was their constant companion. It was a big part of life. Sometimes half the kids born into a family didn't make it to adulthood. But people adapted. People survived. They built lives for their kids, and they learned how to find happiness in their circumstances. "I'd die for her," Michael said, looking over at Afton. "I know you would," said Ma. "I know you'd do anything in the world for her, and someday you may have to die for her, but even if you don't, you can live for her. You can give your life to her now without having to die. Be consumed with teaching her and training her, loving her, helping her. Give your life for her now." "I will," said Michael. "For her, especially, but for all these kids." The New World, Chapter 17, The Way of a Man. "What was it like?" Stevie asked, pushing at the fire with his boot. "I mean, you don't have to answer that, but I'm just curious. What was it like to shoot her?" All the men were sitting around a small campfire. Darren was silent for a few seconds and then answered. "It was like nothing." "What do you mean?" "I just did it. It felt like nothing. I mean, I didn't really feel anything. It felt like duty. Like I was just doing what needed to be done. There were no feelings. It was like all my feelings were shut off, and I was just doing what had to be done." "Huh, how's that for toxic masculinity?" Sandy said. He laughed. "I think," said Darren, "that's part of the whole point." "That's exactly it. Some of the things about being a man, some of the things that were not appreciated in the old world, even things that were called bad, are absolutely essential in this new world. We will not survive without our toxic masculinity." "They've spent so much of their time trying to feminize us," Sandy said, "trying to emasculate us, trying to make us less of who we are, and now those exact things they attacked about us are the things we need so badly. Our survival hangs by a chain. One link of that chain is toxic masculinity. One link is the nurturing instinct of my wife. You know, toxic femininity. There's lots of links, and some of them I'm good at, and some of them she's good at. We need it all. That's why we were made the way we were made. If we were going to survive, we need to embrace who we are, who nature equipped us to be, and not beat ourselves up over it." "Yeah, live the way God made us," Michael nodded. "Well, you say God," Sandy said. "I say nature. I'm not so sure about all that God stuff, but we're not that far apart. We're both talking about a designer and about being made or designed a certain way as men." "I tried to tell people that before," Darren said, "but they laughed at me. They called me stupid and chauvinist and whatever other names they could make up, but when they needed someone to go to Afghanistan, then they needed me and my masculinity. Then I come home and they start putting me down again, calling me names, telling me I'm toxic and useless. Now they're all dead, and our life and our children's lives depend on those things that they condemned. Now the survival of the whole world depends on men standing up and being men." I don't like killing animals, Sandy said, but if I get Bambi in my sights and my family needs food, you bet I'm going to shut my feelings off and pull that trigger. My wife would be a basket case if she had to do that, but she can look in an ugly, noisy, stinky little baby who wakes up every 2 hours and feel compelled to nurture it, to feed it, to take care of it. That would make me a basket case. One thing about this new world, we're all finally valued for who we are. The old world devalued us. It put us down. It called us worthless for who we are. Everybody, Michael added, always said you're too aggressive, or you're too competitive, or you're too obsessive, or you work too much, or you have no feelings, you have no compassion. Everything they told me that was wrong about me, now we need to survive. Yeah, the old world was a fake world, Sandy said. There was no room there for nature or for masculinity or even femininity. There was especially no room for men in that world unless they cut their balls off. Because masculinity, Darren said, can't be controlled. The old world was all about control, all about people submitting to systems of control and management that suck the life out of people and transfer their resources over to a gangster class. Masculine men have to dominate. They have to make their own way. They have to seek truth and nature. All of that is incompatible with the old system of control and submission. Without real men, there's only slavery. And, said Sandy, without real women, there's no peace, no nurture, no family. For them to do what they're good at, they need stability and safety and resources. And part of our purpose is to make that happen. Michael nodded. Without a purpose outside of himself, Darren nodded, a man has no point to his life. Well, not no point, but little point. It's not that there's something wrong with someone just trying to survive for themselves, but men are equipped to do much greater things, things bigger than themselves. Honestly, said Sandy, so are women. They're just equipped in a different way. And it's not that our strengths and our nature oppose each other. It's that we fit perfectly together. Sometimes, said Stevie, it does feel like I have no purpose. You guys all have wives and families. I've got nothing, nobody. Not nobody, said Michael. You have us. We're a community now. One big family. Your purpose is to the community. Yeah, said Stevie, that sounds right. I can do that. Then, Darren added, one day you will have a family of your own. And your biggest purpose and responsibility will be toward them. But you will still be responsible to the community, just more so to your family. But, Sandy chuckled, you can go ahead and be toxic right now. Don't be afraid to be masculine. We can all be toxic and masculine, and we'll be more likely to survive. Michael picked up a bottle of Chinese wine. Hold out your cups, he said. They lifted their glasses, and Michael filled each halfway. Michael filled his own glass and lifted it to theirs. To the new world, he said, to new purpose, to toxic femininity and toxic masculinity, to men and women, to our families, and our new little community. The New World, Chapter 18, Exploration. We don't have enough food, Denise said. The group was having its weekly Sunday night meeting, a practice introduced under the new leadership plan. We have quite a bit of food, she continued. But for a group our size, it's not going to be enough to get us through the winter. I've spent a lot of time adding everything up, and best I can tell, we've got about 3.5 months, if we're careful. It's October now, so that means we're going to run out in late January or early February. That's too early for us to plant and grow more food. How's the hunting going? Joe asked. Maybe we can put up some extra meat for the winter. not so good, Michael said. I've hardly seen anything out there since that first little deer. Lots of carcasses. Most of them aren't even being cleaned up by coyotes. I've only seen that one deer in the last 3 weeks. I'll give up 3 meals a week, said Sylvia. Make sure the kids have food. That will work, said Denise, if we can serve like that. We can stretch the food further, but it still won't be enough. And I do have a problem with people skipping meals and not getting enough food during the winter, when more people tend to get sick. How about the McSpaddens, said Joe. Maybe they had a little food at their place. Well, said Darren, there's an idea. But, we can go beyond that. What do you mean? Asked Sandy. The McSpaddens probably had some food at their place. They didn't look like they've been starving, but it probably wouldn't be enough. But how many other houses are around? Houses that are empty except maybe some bodies? People who didn't shelter or people who didn't make it home? There must be lots of houses out there with food in the pantry or the kitchen, food that's not being used, food that's just going to spoil. Yeah, Sandy said, excited. There must be lots of empty houses out there with food on the shelf. A little here and a little there. We might be able to put together enough to get us through. It's not like the owners are going to need it at this point. Why let it spoil when it can save our lives? And other stuff too, said Denise. Think of the blankets and clothes that are out there. And tools, Michael added. All just free for the taking. Why let it all rot when we can use it? Aren't we just a gang of thieves, Joe said, laughing and shaking her head. Said Sandy, it's funny. We're talking about canned food and tools and blankets and shirts, but not one of us said money and jewelry. It really is a different world. The others nodded and chuckled. He was right. Some of the things which were so important in the old world were worthless now. When you think about it, Darren said, maybe we should grab some of that. At least jewelry and maybe old coins. I know it's not worth anything right now, but maybe in the future, at least maybe for our own enjoyment. We might as well. It's easy to carry and doesn't cost us much more effort. Sounds fine, said Sandy, as long as we keep our priorities straight. Food first, then blankets, clothing, and tools, then other things. And car batteries, said Stevie. His face had healed well, leaving just a light scar on his cheekbone. The more batteries we have, the more electricity we can store, and the more amps we can push. Don't forget guns and ammo, Darren added. Okay, said Sandy. We'll make a shopping list of what we want and prioritize it. But we also need to organize this so we're not going out half-cocked. Darren, can you take the lead on this? If we're going to do this, then other people have thought about it too. Figure out how we're going to go about this and how we approach it in a secure way. No problem, said Darren. I'll build a couple little wagons, Sandy continued, something we can haul things back on. Since none of the vehicles start, we can't use them. But I can put together little wagons and scavenge tires from the lawnmowers. Michael, we can use the four-wheeler, but not on the first contact. We don't want people to know we're coming. Any luck getting the other four-wheeler working? Nope, said Michael. It won't even try to turn over. I think it's just too new and some chip or sensor got fried. I tried for several hours, but can't even get it to turn over. All right, Sandy said. It is what it is. At least we have the one, better than none. Just draw enough gas off one of the vehicles to make sure the tank is full on the good one. Yep, Michael said. Before we make our shopping list, said Sandy, don't forget that at next week's meeting we'll be choosing our new leader for the next month. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad I got this experience, but it's a little stressful too. I'm ready to watch someone else do it. I have some ideas for the shopping list, Joe said, holding up a notebook. I've written some things down: food, blankets, clothing, guns, ammo, hand tools, power tools, garden tools, yard tools, batteries, jewelry, and anything else that looks interesting." "Sounds good," Sandy said. "How about this? Anyone with ideas for the list, see Joe. Tomorrow I'll catch up with Darren and Joe and go over the list and his plans, and we'll firm everything up, so maybe we can start by Tuesday. Anything else we need to talk about?" He looked around the room. Nobody stirred. "Okay," he said, "then let's end this thing." The New World, Chapter 19, Gang of Thieves. "Here's how we're doing it," Darren said to the group. "We're sending out a team of 4, me, Sandy, Stevie, and Denise. Michael, I need you to stay here just in case. Keep your gun with you all the time. We'll take the little wagon Sandy built. Sandy, when we get to a house, you and I will scout it out. If we don't see anyone, we'll clear it room by room. Stevie, Denise, you're going to stay back in the trees until we signal to you that everything is clear. Then you'll come in and we'll go through the house. Everything we need, we'll stack on the front lawn. First priority is food. Stevie, when we're almost done, you'll run back for the four-wheeler. We're leaving that here until we know everything is clear, so we don't announce to everyone that we're coming. We can't afford to get caught off guard with another McSpadden incident. Any questions?" He paused and looked at each of them, but nobody spoke up. "Okay," he said. "Today we're heading south towards Sandy Bend. Since we know there are people in that direction, we want to acquire those houses before they do. Let's go." The team of 4 shouldered rifles. "How long are you going to be out?" Ma asked. "Depends," Darren answered. "If we don't find anything, we'll be back in a few hours, but if we find a decent target, it could be an all-day operation." Sandy, Darren, Denise, and Stevie walked to the road and turned towards town. As the group disappeared behind the trees, Joe walked up to Michael. "What do you think about this?" she asked. "About going into houses and taking stuff?" he asked. "Yes," said Joe. It just makes me uneasy, like we really are a gang of thieves or something." "I know what you mean," said Michael, "but here's how I look at it. That stuff could save our lives. It's just sitting there helping nobody right now. And you can't steal from dead people. Might as well use what we can." "What if," Joe asked, "they weren't dead? What if they were still alive in those houses?" "Well," said Michael, that would be a tough one. I don't think we're going to be raiding people, stealing things from them." Michael pointed to Afton playing on the front lawn. "But if she were starving, or if she needed a blanket or medical supplies, if she needed something, it might make the difference between life and death. I feel like I might do anything. I hope it doesn't come down to that. I don't want to go there, because there's no going back at that point." "I think there's no going back for any of us," Joe said. "I wish we could. I really wish we could just go back to before all this happened. For the kids, I'm afraid for them and the kind of world they're growing up in." The day was productive but anxious. Everyone kept one eye on the road as they worked, hoping to catch some glimpse of a returning team member and some news about what they'd found. Finally, during the late afternoon, 4 figures appeared down the road. "Daddy, Daddy!" Nathan yelled, jumping up and down. Everyone gathered in the front yard as the team drew nearer, finally walking in the driveway. Darren shook his head. Heart sank. "There are 3 houses and 2 mobiles between here and the McSpadden's place. They've all been looted. I assume it was the McSpadden boys. They trashed everything. The doors are busted in, windows are smashed, stuff from the house is just strewn all over the lawns. It's just horrendous, so wasteful. They just trashed it all. No food," he continued, "not in those places. I think we might still be able to scavenge a few tools here and there, and maybe some batteries from vehicles, maybe even some blankets, but Most everything's ruined. However, he paused and sighed. We did get as far as the McSpadden place. It's trashed. Bad. But I think there are things there that can help us. The place was empty when we got there. No sign of anyone having been there for a while. The house is it's full of trash. Like a bunch of kids or a bunch of drunks lived there. They never buried their parents. The bodies are in a brush pile out back. Looks like coyotes got to one of them. Inside the house there's a pantry with a fair amount of food. Not a lot, but enough to really, really help us. It might add a couple weeks to our supplies, which is a big deal. Most of it's in boxes and bags, just stacked on the floor, probably stuff they hauled in from other houses and just dumped there. There's a little shed with shovels and rakes and other tools, and there are 4 vehicles that we might be able to scavenge batteries from. There are blankets and clothes, but it's all pretty ratty, and it would need a really good washing if we brought any of it back here. They have 4 or 5 cord of firewood. We'll need to decide if it's worth hauling up here or easier just to cut wood around here. So here's the plan we came up with. By the time we got to the McSpadden place and cleared the house, there wasn't really enough time to get started on moving things. So we headed back here for the evening. Tomorrow, we'll go back down there. Sandy and I will clear the house again, and if everything looks good, we'll send Stevie back for the 4-wheeler. We'll process the house and hopefully be done with it by the end of the day. Then on another day, we can start probing north of here. I don't think we're going to find anything else towards town. It would be just a waste of time going that way, since if the McSpaddens haven't already picked it over, probably folks from town have. The news was not what everyone wanted to hear. The group was hoping for a windfall of food and clothing and blankets, but it didn't work out that way. There was some food, though, and Darren was right. 2 weeks of additional food would be a big deal. The idea of exhausting their food supply looked like a big brick wall that they couldn't see past. Pushing the brick wall back a little gave some sense of relief, if only for 2 weeks. Well, said Sylvia, I was hoping for better news, but it's something. It's worth doing. It sounds like the plan you guys came up with is the best way to go about it. We'll get what we can from there, and then maybe we'll have better luck heading north. Ma served up a hot and delicious deer stew for supper that evening. Most of the group made it an early night in order to get rested for the work the next day. The team was up before the sun the next morning. They dressed warmly, shouldered their firearms, and headed off into the darkness with the utility wagons, just as the sun began to rise in the gray, hazy sky. Stevie arrived back to get the 4-wheeler. He hooked a wagon up behind it and headed back down the road. Throughout the day, team members arrived with loads of loot. The first 2 trips were all food. Then they began bringing batteries, blankets, tools, and other items they thought may be useful. Ma got right to work soaking blankets and clothes. Joe began sorting the food, while Sylvia did school with the children. Joe organized it by type, tossing out jars and bags that had been opened, not knowing how it had been treated and handled or even where it had come from. They didn't want to risk eating anything that had the potential to be contaminated. All 4 returned with the final load, just as the sun was sinking into the wooded hills to the west. Everyone was exhausted, but there was a sense of accomplishment. They had added a bunch of food to their supply, and it looked like close to 3 weeks' worth. With a mix of exhaustion and excitement, the members of the small community headed off to sleep, hoping for a better tomorrow. The New World, Chapter 20, True North. The group got up before the sun again. Michael started a fire so that Ma and Denise could work on breakfast. Darren brewed coffee as the ladies picked up a stack of pancakes. Since it was a special day, they indulged a little by pulling out a jar of ghee and a bottle of maple syrup and a can of bacon-flavored canned pork. "'Fore I eat," said Michael, as the ladies began passing out plates, I'm going to step out and grab some firewood and fill that box back up for later, and then I'll eat. He opened the front door and froze in the doorway. Ma and Jolene walked up behind him and stopped in their tracks. It was snowing. There were at least 4 inches on the ground, and it was still coming down so heavily they could barely see the road from the door. Michael closed the door and turned. "Oh, shit," he said. "I didn't expect that." The others went to the door one by one, peeking out. "We all knew it was coming," said Michael, "but I didn't expect that today. I really hoped it would be late this year." "We're going to have to postpone the trip today," said Sylvia. "I think we should still go," said Darren. "In the snow?" Sylvia asked. "Yes," he answered. "It's not going to be ideal, but we need to find food. We will not make it to spring without food, and I'll go out in the snow and do this rather than watch my children slowly starve to death." Jo nodded her head. "I hate the idea of them going out in the storm," she said. "But he's right. We need to get this moving ahead." "The longer we put it off," said Darren, "the more likely we are to lose food to cans splitting and jars bursting when they freeze in all those unheated houses. And the storm today, other people are less likely to be out in it. And if they are, the visibility is going to be so bad they won't be able to see us coming." "I guess," said Sylvia. I hate it. But we do need it, regardless the weather." "I'm in," said Sandy. "I don't have any boots, but I'll put a couple layers of socks on." "Me too," said Stevie. "I say we go." "If you guys are going," said Denise, "then so am I." "All right," Darren said. "After we get some hot food in us, we'll suit up best we can and head up the road." A gust of wind blew by, rippling the plastic on the front windows. "We really need to replace those," said Sandy, "or board them up. We're going to lose so much heat through those broken windows this winter." "Oh, if we'd been thinking," said Stevie, we could have pulled some windows out of the McSpadden place. Even if the size was a little different, we could frame them up to fit." "It's probably too late for that now," said Sandy. "We'll just have to keep an eye out when we go up the road." "Those McSpadden boys were wearing boots when we dragged them off into the woods," said Michael. "Maybe you could—" "Nah, I'm all set with that," Sandy cut him off, holding up his hand. "Even if they didn't have rotted flesh in them by now, I wouldn't want anything that touched those raunchy feet. I'll stick to my sneakers." While Michael filled the wood box, the others ate the best breakfast they'd had in a long time. Right after, the team of 4 suited up, doing their best to find scarves, coats, boots, and shoes that fit. They headed out the door, stepping carefully in the snow. Soon, they disappeared into the wall of snow. "I'm going to need the kids today," said Michael. "We've got a bunch of wood down and cut, but most of it is still where we cut it. We need to get it up to the house." "Well, they need to know that everybody does their part," Jo nodded. "I'll help too, since the kids will be working instead of doing school. I guess it's a snow day." "Sounds good," said Michael. "We'll haul it from the big pile by the maple blowdowns and stack it right in the front yard so it's easy to get this winter." Michael, Jo, Timmy, and Nathan suited up and went out into the storm to haul firewood. The smaller children stayed with Ma and Sylvia to clean house and move supplies around. Ma was in the kitchen, heating water to wash dishes and clothing, when there was a bang, bang, bang at the front door. She tried to peek out a window but couldn't see anything through the layers of plastic. She picked up the 9mm from a bag hanging by the door and cautiously opened it. It was Stevie. Ma stepped quickly aside, and Stevie pushed through the door, bags under both arms and a pack on his back. He set down his burdens on the table and unwrapped the scarf that was wound several times around his face. "Oh," Stevie said, "that didn't seem so heavy when I left there." He looked exhausted. Stevie held his arms over the stove to warm them. "We're going to get some good stuff from there," he said. I brought some back here because I was coming back anyway to let everyone know what was going on." Ma pulled the first bag open. It was full of canned food. She pulled the pack open and gasped. Reaching in, she pulled out a 25-pound bag of flour and lay it on the table. She went back into the pack and pulled out 2 5-pound bags of sugar and 2 4-pound bags of pickling salt. She opened the last bag to find 2 gallons of apple cider vinegar and some canned chicken. "This is great stuff," she said, hardly containing her excitement. "They were ready for anything," Stevie said. "Well, except radioactive fallout, I guess. It looks like they died together in their bed. Darren says we should bury their bodies in the spring in honor of what they gave us." "Oh," Ma exclaimed, "I agree. How much more like this is there?" "Quite a bit," Stevie said. "There's more flour and sugar and salt, all kinds of seasonings and spices. There's a ton of canned veggies and fruit, a bunch of bags of different beans. Darren found a box in their pantry with all kinds of seeds. And the barn, it's full of old hand tools and lots of bales of hay. The upstairs closet has all kinds of homemade quilts, and Sandy found a pair of work boots that fit him. And in the basement, there's just shelf after shelf of canning jars filled with food. Most of them don't have labels or dates, so Denise says, well, that'll make it harder, but there's so much down there." They're still searching the place. Darren started a fire in the wood stove to warm things up and make it easier to work. Oh, and Darren found a bunch of coffee. It's all whole beans, so it needs to be ground. Ma had tears in her eyes. "We've needed this," she cried. "We've needed this for so long. We've needed something to go right for a change, for something good to happen." She hugged Stevie. "Oh, Stevie," she said, letting go of him, "for so long, all I've been able to see is death. Everyone just dying. All of us dying. I couldn't even see into the future because there was just a brick wall, but I think we're going to make it now." Stevie smiled. "I know, Ma," he said. "It's so nice to have good news. It seemed like we were all going to just starve to death. I even thought about, well, just shooting myself when we ran out of food so I wouldn't have to watch everyone else starve and die." "Don't ever think like that," Ma scolded through her tears. "We'll always find a way. We'll always find hope. I know we will. And I'm sorry for doubting it now. God never left us. All this time, His blessing was just up the road waiting for us to find it." "I wish Dad were here for this," Stevie said. "I wish Sid was here to play in the snow. I wish I could make a snowman with him." Now Stevie was choking back his own tears. "Yes," Ma said. "Yes, that would have been nice, but there are people that are here, and we need to focus on them now. Don't forget those that are gone, because we honor them with our memory, but we need to remember that the ones that are still here with us need us. We can't do anything for the ones that are gone, but the ones that are still here, we can do a lot for them." The New World, Chapter 21, Multiplication and Division. "Is there anything else we need to talk about?" Denise said. They were finishing up their Sunday meeting, having just appointed Darren as the leader for the next month. The mood in their meetings had turned from dread, fear, and concern to hope and excitement. All the food from the Kinney farm had been brought up to the house and inventoried. Denise had done an accounting of it and announced that there was now enough to get them through midsummer if they were careful with it. "Yes," Sandy said, "2 things. He nodded at Sylvia, who smiled back and stood up. "Well," Sylvia said, "I just thought I'd share something with everyone now that we're sure." She paused and looked at all the faces. "I'm pregnant," she said. The whole group was quiet. Their faces failed to hide their shock. "Well," said Sylvia, I'm not announcing a funeral. I'm talking about a new baby." Yeah, said Michael. "I know. It's just that we didn't expect that. Here, now. with all this going on, but I guess it was bound to happen at some point. If not you, then one of the other women. Not me, Ma said, holding up her hands. I'm out of that game. The group laughed and the tension melted away. With the food and other supplies they found at the Kenny farm, the mood had become hopeful. Now, with the news of a new baby on the way, they were about to begin actually seeing a future of prosperity and of new generations beyond their own. Wow, Joe said. Sylvie, that's great. We're going to have to make some baby clothes. This is going to be fun. Congratulations, Sandy, said Darren. Stevie, Sylvia said, what's the matter? You don't look happy. Stevie looked up and forced a smile. I'm happy for you, he said. Just thinking it's great you're having a baby, and maybe some others here will have babies too, but me, I don't even have a wife. And where's my wife even going to come from? Am I going to live my whole life with nobody? Stevie, said Ma, I know how you feel. I grew up in the old world, and I felt the same thing. I was in my 30s before I met your dad, and we were married. I was beginning to think that I'd be alone forever. Listen, we've had our share of bad times since all this started, but look, we've also had a lot of good surprises. Don't give up hope. How soon, Sylvie? Asked Denise. April or May, best I can tell, she answered. That's counting back to my last period. It's a little confusing because I may not be counting right because of all this that has happened. I didn't write anything down. A spring baby, Denise smiled. So glad they won't be born during the winter. Denise looked back at Sandy. What else, Sandy? She asked. Well, he said. He cleared his throat. We were thinking that come spring, if it was okay with everyone, if we could move into the Kinney farm, Sylvie and I and Nathan. The group was quiet again. The thought of dividing the community had never occurred to them, and they were taken by surprise by what Sandy said. I think, Sandy said, that it would give us our own space as a family, and plus it'd be easier for us to watch over the crops we're going to be planting in the fields down there. For a moment, there was no response. Then Darren spoke. I don't know, Sandy, he said. It doesn't sit well with me thinking about us all spread out. I think it's best, said Sandy. We can't all live together forever, and the farm is so close to us, it's not like we'd be moving across the country. Yeah, it means we'll be a little more spread out, but not that far. The farm's only a couple minutes walk up the road. We'll talk about it more, Darren said, unconvinced. We have plenty of time to think about it and talk about it more. I see what you mean. It just doesn't sit well right now. Okay, Sandy said. It's not like we're asking for a divorce or something, or to leave the group. Just for some space of our own. All right, said Denise. Let's end this meeting. Remember, Darren is our coordinator for next month, so all complaints go to him now. A couple folks chuckled, but it was obvious that a wet blanket had been thrown over the group's mood. The New World, Chapter 22, Friend or Foe? It's them, said Sandy, but who's that with them? There's 2 other people. Michael and Stevie had been making daily trips further and further north up the road. They had explored several more houses, bringing back a little food from each. Nothing as bountiful as the Kenny farm. This time they were returning with 2 other people, trudging slowly down the snowy road. Go get your rifle and tell the ladies to secure the children in the basement, Darren said to Sandy. Sylvia and Ma can stay with the children. Tell Joe and Denise to get their guns and stay in the kitchen by the front door. Sandy nodded, took off towards the house. Hey, yelled Michael, and they were close enough. I brought company. Finally, the 4 made it to where Darren was standing at the top of the hill. Darren, said Michael, this is Tyler. Behind me here is Jared. Tyler and Jared, this is Darren. He's our leader this month, our coordinator, whatever. He's the boss man. It was hard to tell under the beards and weathered faces, but Tyler looked to be in his 40s, and Jared was probably in his early 20s. "It's good to meet you," Darren said politely, extending his hand. Tyler shook his hand and smiled. "It was quite a surprise to meet your friends here," Tyler said. "We were beginning to think we were all that was left up here." "They're about 4 hours up the road," Michael said. "They've got a small homestead in the woods up a long driveway." "Yes," Tyler smiled. "We had a dream once, during better times, but it's a real struggle now. There's 27 of us, mostly family, that showed up when the first bomb was dropped. We have 80 acres on paper, but only a couple acres are cleared. Food has been our biggest problem. We'd put up a lot, but not enough for a group this size, and we've had to send a couple people away. They just weren't compatible with the community, and their actions threatened all of us." "We understand that," said Michael, "for sure." "Well," said Darren, "why don't we go inside where it's warm and talk some more? It's getting dark." He was suspicious and wary of the newcomers. He didn't want to give away too much information in case they were like the McSpaddens, but he also didn't want to miss the chance to build friendships if they were good people. He wanted to learn more about them. The 5 men walked up to the house and in the door. "Joe," said Darren, once inside, "go tell the ladies to let the children up. Denise, see if you and Ma can fix up some extra food for supper tonight so these friends can join us." The men and women pulled up chairs. "I envy you," said Tyler, looking around. "So much space for your group?" "It's Michael's house," Darren said. "We all sat out the fallout down in his basement. We're all family in one way or another." "Nice," said Tyler. "Did everyone make it?" "From our own experience, I think I know the answer, but I'm curious." "We've lost a couple," said Sandy. "And we had to deal with one who, well, like you said, was not compatible with the community. Almost got us all killed." "I'm sorry to hear that," said Tyler, shaking his head. "These are bad times. You sure learn how to appreciate those you do have. We're lucky to still have the 27 of us." "And mostly girls," Michael said with a laugh, looking over his shoulder at Stevie. Stevie gave an embarrassed grin and looked down at the floor. "Food," Tyler continued. "Like I said before, it's our biggest challenge. I assume it's a challenge for you, too?" "How are you set for the winter?" Sandy asked. "Well, depends," said Tyler. "We don't have enough for everyone for the winter unless we slaughter the goats." "They have lots of goats," said Michael, "a big herd." "And chickens," Stevie added. "We have 22 goats," Tyler nodded. "I hate to slaughter them, but we need food, and we're almost out of hay to feed them anyway. It's been nice having milk and cheese, but we need to feed people." "So," he shook his head. Michael looked at Darren. "Listen," said Michael, looking at Darren. I haven't said anything to him, but, we may be able to do some kind of trade." "We're open to trades," Tyler said. "But I can't imagine you or anyone these days having anything extra to trade. Maybe we can trade some milk and cheese for some canned vegetables or whatever." "Well," said Darren. He paused, as if deciding whether or not to say anything. "We do have something you might be interested in." "What's that?" Tyler asked. "We," said Darren, "have a barn full of hay." Tyler gasped. "Hay?" he exclaimed. "Hay?" "Yes," said Darren. "I'm sure we can work out something mutual, and I'll talk with the others, but we may be able to help somewhat with food, depending what you bring to the table. We're walking a tight line with food, but we'll talk. Maybe we can do some trading that will benefit both of us." "For hay to keep the goats alive," said Tyler. "I'm sure we can come up with some good trade. With plenty of hay, the goats will continue to produce milk, and that'll go a long way to keeping folks fed. Wow, I never imagined it would even be possible." "Let's talk about it after supper," Darren said, "and see what agreement we can come to. I'm sure you have a number of resources we could use, and As well, we have some you can use. Best, I think, is that both our communities can benefit from being friends. Friends seem to be in short supply right now. The group and their guests had a hot supper, then spent another 3 hours talking out a trade deal. They finally came to a tentative agreement, which Tyler agreed to take back to his community. Everyone went to bed, full of hope and excitement, not knowing that their situation was about to take a turn for the worse and pose to them the greatest challenge since the first bomb dropped. The New World, Chapter 23, Taxation Without Representation. Most of the group was up before the sun the next morning to see off their visitors. Tyler and Jared stayed for coffee and a hot breakfast, but were anxious to get back on the road. "I'll follow you down the hill," Michael said. I can show you the hay." Denise had fixed a Goodwill gift package for them, wrapping up a little coffee, some sugar, and a jar of deer meat in a sack. Darren agreed to let them take 2 bales of hay if they thought they could haul it through the snowy road back to their home. Darren and Michael followed them out the door. "It's been a pleasure meeting you," Darren said, shaking their hands. "I hope you can come and visit again. Maybe come spring I can make it up there for a visit. I don't think this leg," he slapped his lame right leg, "would let me get up there in the snow during the wintertime." "We'd love it," Tyler smiled. "Anytime any of you want to come by, please do. It really has been a pleasure. I'll be talking with folks when we get back home, and I'm sure I'll be back to finalize a deal of some sort with the hay." "Why is he running?" Michael said, looking toward the south tree line. Stevie was running wildly toward the house. His feet went out from under him in the snowy path. He quickly climbed back up from the ground and began running again. Stevie reached the group by the front door, breathless and panting. "Coming," he said, pointing to the road. "People!" He gulped air, trying to catch his breath. Darren put his hand on his sidearm and looked down the road. He couldn't see far from where he was. "There's people coming," Stevie said, his chest still heaving. "Lots of them, about a dozen, and they have guns." Alarmed, Darren shouted to the others in the house, "Ma, Sylvia, get the kids into the basement. Denise, Joe, go get your guns. Michael, Stevie, go back to the south tree line and stay out of sight. If things go south, you can fire on them from their flank. Sandy, you and I will meet them down by the road and see what's going on." He turned to Tyler. "You," he said, "may want to take this moment to get headed back home while you can. I'm sorry, but I can't spare Michael to follow you down the hill." "We'll stay," said Tyler, pulling a .40 Smith & Wesson from inside his coat. He flicked the safety off and racked it back. "Let's go," Darren said. "Let's go," Darren said. The 4 men walked down to the end of the short driveway, while the others rushed about to their own stations. When they reached the road, they could clearly see a group less than a quarter mile away, plodding steadily toward them. 11 of them, said Sandy. "They all got rifles and shotguns." It took a good 20 minutes for the strangers to push through the piled and drifted snow in the road to reach the driveway. Most of the group were in dirty, torn jackets and work boots. Their faces were sunken, unshaven, and humorless. A man in front wore a nice winter coat and insulated snow boots. "Greetings," said the man in front as he approached. "I am Captain Mueller of the Sandy Bend Militia. We are here to collect your tax." "Tax?" asked Darren. "Everyone needs to do their part. These are difficult times all around, and you are all required to meet your obligations. Your levy is 20% of all foodstuffs, 10% of clothing, blankets, and footwear, 20% of any livestock, 50% of all ammunition. Your obligation is due immediately." "We don't live in Sandy Bend," Darren said. "You do now," Mueller said. "We go where we see fit and expand where we choose. It is not advisable to resist us." "We do not live in Sandy Bend," Darren said again. "We are in no way, shape, or form under your authority or in any way obligated to anyone in Sandy Bend." Mueller cleared his throat. How many of you are there? The captain asked. Enough, Darren replied. Mueller grimaced. How much food do you have? He asked. Not enough, said Darren. How much ammunition and how many guns do you have? He asked. Darren just stared at him. Livestock? Darren still said nothing. Do you have children? Mueller asked ominously. I know someone who might like to meet them if you do. We may be able to work out a deal to lessen your tax burden if this conversation is over, Darren stated. Goodbye. Sandy's finger stroked the trigger of his .308 and his eyes narrowed. Don't make this harder for everyone, Mueller said. Just meet your obligation and do your part as a good law-abiding citizen, and everyone benefits. Goodbye, said Darren. Don't come this far north again. We may not be as friendly next time. Mueller frowned. He hesitated as if trying to make a decision. He looked at the 4 men in front of him, then at the house. He scanned the tree lines and looked up and down the road. I regret that you have chosen to be irresponsible, the captain said. That's bad for all of us. I will, indeed, be back, and there will be very serious consequences for all of you. He waved down the road and his men turned and began trudging through the snow back south. If you had been a responsible citizen and a good person today, he said, things would have been better for everyone. You had very simple and fair obligations to meet, and you willfully neglected them. What happens next is squarely on your shoulders. Sad that there always has to be people like you to make good people suffer. Captain Mueller turned and followed his men down the road. Slowly they picked their way through the snow. After about half an hour, they disappeared around the corner. Did I do the right thing? Darren asked, watching them vanish into the snowy landscape. We have no obligation to them, Sandy said. We could be in trouble, said Darren. Look, Sandy said, one thing I've learned, just because someone says something is so, doesn't mean it is so. We have no contract or agreement of any kind with them, and there's no legitimate government unless it operates by the free will of the people. We never assented to their government. They're just a gang of common thugs and thieves operating under the guise of government. And after that comment about the children, he's lucky he still has a head on his shoulders. This is going to mean trouble, Darren said, shaking his head. Yeah, said Sandy. But it would have been more trouble if we just rolled over and given up to them. People like that are never satisfied. They take and they take and they take. Common bullies is what they are, using words and threats to manipulate people into submission. They are the enemy of humanity. Their type was in charge before, and their greed destroyed the world. I will die before I let those types of people come back to power. We have some planning to do, said Darren. He turned to Tyler and Jared. I'm sorry your lives had to be risked in this. When Michael gets back to the house, I'll send him with you down to the barn for that hay. Then you might want to hunker down at your homestead so those people don't come for your things. I'm glad I was able to witness this, Tyler said. We've been so isolated, I had no idea this type of thing was happening. We do need to go back and secure our community. And as for obligations, our only obligation to people like that is resistance. Michael and Stevie returned to the house, and Darren sent Michael to the barn with the 2 guests. The excitement and hope of meeting new people had so quickly given way to a dark storm cloud over the community. That evening, Darren called all the adults together for a meeting after the children were put to bed. He explained every last detail of Captain Mueller's visit. What do we want to do? He asked them. Can we hit them first? Joe asked. Maybe if we surprise them, we can have the upper hand. I wouldn't advise it, Darren said. We don't know any specifics about where they are and how many people they have. One thing we do know is they have more people than we do. I think being the smaller force, our best option is to be in a defensive posture if there's any conflict. That's our best option as far as success and reducing casualties. I just don't like how he talked about the children, she said. I know, Denise said. Me either. I don't want to see anyone get hurt, but I'll die standing between them and my child. And, Michael said, we can't give them any of our food anyway. We have barely enough to get us through until harvest. We'll starve to death if we give 20% to them. So we might as well die on our feet instead of on our knees. Do we all understand what we're saying? Asked Darren. We're talking about the end of our community. We're talking about us dying, the children dying. I like how Michael put it, said Sandy. Let's die on our feet protecting our families, rather than die on our knees in submission to evil people. If this is how it ends, then so be it. Let's end it in such a way that evil people all over this area will think twice before ever afflicting free people again. It's strange, said Ma. Just a few weeks ago, most people's biggest problems were choosing which flavor of syrup to have in their coffee and how to get more likes on their social media posts. Now, here we are getting ready to die for something way bigger than ourselves. The old world, said Joe, had the same evil people in it. Many of them were in positions of power, but they'd created such a fake world that we were all distracted by stupid stuff that didn't really matter while they looted and plundered. It's time, Darren nodded, for us to water the tree of liberty. I've got to know all of you so much better over the last few weeks. I want to tell you how much I respect you all, and what an honor it's been to know you and to work by your side. We all feel the same, said Ma. I think I can speak for everyone here. It really has been an honor to live together like this and, well, die together if we have to. I've been alive long enough, but I can't think of a better group of people to die with. Like Michael explained, Sandy said, they may have more people than us, but let's figure out how to make them hurt, so they think twice before ever doing this to someone again. Make it cost them more than they will gain from it. We can burn it, Sylvia said, tears in her eyes. If they get past all of us, let's just burn the whole place so they get nothing. Scorched earth, said Sandy, nodding his head. Make it cost them dearly for nothing. Darren, you come up with a plan to defend the place and we'll follow it. We'll make them hurt. The New World, Chapter 24. Death Throes. It's looking bad, said the voice from the radio. Darren said, turning the volume up. The guy from Idaho. I really thought we were in good shape. Plenty of food, supplies, guns, seed for the spring. There's 5 families with us now. Things were going so well. But it's like the Wild West out here. The armed gangs are pushing deeper and deeper into the area. They burned the Thatch place yesterday. They're only 2 miles from here. I haven't been out to see if there are any survivors. There's just so many of them. Those gangs, they're just flooding the area. It's like they somehow knew that people in our area had stored up food and supplies, and they're just systematically taking everything. I thought we could resist them, but they just grow stronger and stronger. They started out by picking off the loners and plumbering their preps. Then they began going after families and little homesteads. Now they're taking on whole communities. Just the Thurston gang alone has 40 now. What's happened to this world? The voice began breaking up, almost sobbing. I thought things were going so well. My wife died last week. Radiation poisoning. I don't know how she got exposed, maybe one of those low-lying areas or some food that was tainted. I don't know, but she suffered way too long before she passed. I don't know if there's anything worth living for. I had so much hope for a better future. People were starting to come together. We were making plans for the spring, and now everything's collapsing and the darkness is coming. One thing I do know, when they come here, they're going to be sorry they did. We don't have enough strength to fight them off, but we can, and we will make them hurt. We will make them feel such a sting. That's the best investment I can now make in the future of this new world, to die making them suffer as much as possible, to give them cause to hesitate when they think about hitting another community. My house and my barn are rigged with dynamite. They will suffer, and they will get nothing. That's my purpose and my duty now, to resist them toe to toe, and in my death, to inflict such harm and loss on them that they wince at the thought of doing it again to anyone. I'm off for the night. I don't know who or how many are listening, but I wish you all the best. I wish I'd been able to get to know some of you, but fate presses onward. God be with you. This would be the last transmission the little community ever heard from the man in Idaho. They felt a deep kinship and friendship with this man that they had never met. The New World, Chapter 25, The Reckoning. It was an exceptionally cold morning. A fire was going in the wood stove, but it seemed like the house just wouldn't heat up. Michael and Stevie, Darren said, you go to the area of blowdowns along the road, where our lookout is. Drag some of the logs over to build a low fortification that you can kneel behind. Pack the roadside of the logs with snow so that it's not easily visible. When they engage us up here by the house, your job will be to open fire on their rear flank to cause confusion and panic and demoralization. Then retreat into the woods and circle around to the garage and help us cover the house from there. When you take the pressure off their rear, that will give them a comfortable avenue to retreat. Hopefully they'll take it if we've inflicted enough casualties, or at least fear, and that'll be the best outcome for the first encounter. Ma, you and Sylvia keep the kids in the basement. You'll be the last line of defense if things go south. You'll be the last one standing. Sandy, Denise, Joe, the four of us will be here in the house. Denise, you cover the south side from that window down the hall. The rest of us will cover the front of the house. That's most likely where the main group will try to advance. They're going to want to take the place as fast as they can to minimize their own casualties and to minimize damage to the stuff they want to steal. Our job is to slow them down as much as possible and to make it as costly as possible for them. Let me remind you, they're going to have a much superior force, at least in numbers. Barring a miracle, I don't see how we could come out of this over them. And even if we do, we will have casualties. And I'm not giving up on a miracle, just being realistic. Even if we drive them off by some miracle, nothing will be the same after this. People are going to die. Maybe all of us. But let's make it cost them dearly. Sandy, those windows on the front of the house that you boarded up for the winter, put an extra layer of boards over them, except the lowest board. The lowest ones need to have hinges, so we can open and close them from the inside, like gun ports. Take hinges off the interior doors here in the house if you need to. Everyone, make sure you have all the ammo you can possibly carry. If this thing goes on for a little bit, you don't need to be running out and having to leave your position to get more. Ma, Sylvia, how this ends will rest on your shoulders. I've put 1.5 gallons of gasoline, everything we have left, in the basement. There's matches, too. When they break through into the house, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can't give that kind of order. But you choose what to do at that point. That's our plan. Any questions? The group had resolve on their faces. They knew how hopeless the situation was, but they also knew that they were doing something bigger than themselves. "I'll be done before noon," said Sandy. "What else should I do?" "Just be with your family," Darren said. "We don't know if they're coming today, tomorrow, next week, so love on your family today. You might not be able to tomorrow." Everyone went right to work without even stopping for breakfast. Work was done by noon, and they sat down to a hot meal while Stevie kept watch at the new lookout fort. "There ain't no bullets getting through that," said Michael. "We built it 2 logs thick and 3 logs high, and we put a lot of brush and limbs in front of it, so they'll have a hard time getting to it if they decide to rush it. Just so you all know," he continued, "Stevie set up those rusty bear traps he found down at the farm. They're under the snow in front of the log fort, so don't go walking around down there." "Good thinking," Darren said. "Joe and I spread out all the guns and ammo boxes next to the windows. The windows are all reinforced and the gun ports installed," Sandy said. "Ain't pretty, but it'll stop a few bullets." "I've put together some packs of bandages for each of us," said Sylvia. "Denise and I," said Ma, "got that big table down the basement steps. We'll flip it up against the doorway when the time comes. It'll be part of our last line against them." "I think," said Darren, "we're as ready as we'll ever be. I'll say it again. You guys you're amazing. I'm just so privileged to have spent this time with you. All of you. I'm just so privileged. I don't know what else to say." "We all feel that way," said Denise. "We had a good thing here. It was a good run. Everything we've been through, and I respect you all even more. I love you guys." "We did have a great thing here," said Sandy, "but what we do now is an even greater thing." The others nodded, resolute in their determination to make a last stand for justice and good. Suddenly the front door flung open. Stevie bounded in, breathless. They're coming," he said. They just came around the corner. It's like 30 or 40 of them." "I was hoping for fewer," said Darren with a grimace. "Okay, let's all get to our stations. Michael, take this radio. You guys are great. Let's punish these animals, make every shot count, and keep squeezing that trigger until your last breath." People scrambled to their places. Ma and Sylvia moved the children to the basement and flipped the table up in the doorway. Joe, Sandy, and Darren took up their positions at the 3 windows and opened the gun ports. Denise knelt next to the south window. "Honey," Sandy said. "Yes, Sandy," said Sylvia from the basement. "I love you," said Sandy. "I love you too," she replied with tears in her voice. Joe and Darren exchanged looks. "See you on the other side," Joe said. Darren nodded. "We'll see who gets to hug Sid first," he said. Darren squeezed the talk button on the radio. "Remember, guys, whatever happens, we keep punishing them until our last breath. Even if they take us all out, they don't win this one. We have to make sure that they hurt so bad they don't do this to anyone else." He released the button. Michael's voice came back over the radio. "Denise, I love you," he said. "However bad it gets, remember, we'll be seeing each other again soon. This isn't the end, just a new beginning." Darren racked back the bolt on his AR to chamber around. He stood and went to the door, slipping it open just a few inches so he could look out. The men were not in sight yet. Suddenly there was a crack of a rifle and boom of a shotgun. Multiple shots rang out in response. Blood-curdling screams echoed through the forest. "No, no, no," said Darren. He put the radio to his mouth. Too soon, too soon. Fall back to the garage." He dropped the radio in his shirt pocket. "They weren't supposed to start firing until the enemy engaged us," he said. "Now the whole force is going to go after them. Sandy, help me slide that cabinet in front of here to barricade the door. This is going to be a lot worse." In less than a minute, the shooting stopped, and silence settled onto the woods again. The group in the house waited quietly until they heard Denise's voice. "They're coming out of the woods," she said. Stevie and Michael? Asked Darren. No, said Denise. It's them, a dozen of them. Darren hung his head with disappointment. He knew what that meant, but he didn't say it out loud. Okay, pick your shots, he finally said. Make every bullet count. Hit them as hard as you can. Slow them down as much as you can. Denise peered down the iron sights of a .308. She pulled the trigger and a man fell sideways into the snow. The others leapt to the ground. There was shouting from the road, and the men began to climb to their feet again. Denise began firing as fast as she could. Men were hit, men fell, but the group kept charging the house. I see them, said Joe, on the road. The main force had reached the end of the driveway. There were at least a couple dozen men down there. Darren, Sandy, and Joe opened fire and laid down a withering wall of bullets. 4 men fell. Captain Mueller came up behind the group with another half-dozen followers. Get up there, you cowards, he said. Get into that house. You, back there, get in the ditch here and lay down fire on that house. And anything moves, blow it to hell. The half-dozen men with him jumped into the ditch. The front group began storming up the driveway. Some fell, but the enemy kept coming, slowly, deliberately. Sandy was the first to fall. He was hit in the left side of his head and flipped sideways onto the floor, laying motionless. About the same time, Darren became aware that Denise was no longer firing. Joe, he shouted over the gunfire, can you see Denise? Joe could see down the hallway from her position. She looked and gasped. She's down, she shouted to Darren. The men were almost to the house. Many had fallen, but not nearly enough. Ugh! Darren grunted, blood spurt from his right shoulder. Darren! Joe shouted from the other end of the room. A rifle butt thrust through the gun port, catching Darren in the face and sending him backwards. No, Joe shrieked. Fall back, he said to her. Joe pulled away from the window and huddled down behind the kitchen island. He could just see Darren from where she was. Darren tried to reach the rifle, but he couldn't get up. His face was covered in blood and his right arm was immobile. He struggled to stay conscious, fumbling with his left arm, trying to reach the .45 in its holster on his right hip. It was just a little too far away. Joe began to cry. Darren looked at her. Suddenly there was a bang at the front door, then another and another. The gunfire had stopped, and men were throwing themselves against the door, trying to break it in. Darren could see the hinges beginning to give way. It was over. Darren lay still. Softly and feebly he began to sing a song that he remembered his mother singing long, long ago, in another world, in another life. When peace, like a river, attendeth my way. When sorrows, Joe was singing with them now, like sea billows roll. Voices burst from the basement. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Darren faded from consciousness as the door and cabinet flung inward. Get out of the way, came a shout from outside. Captain Mueller pushed his way into the room. He looked at Darren on the floor. Dog, he shouted, you lost it all. Anyone left in here is going to pay dearly for your foolishness. The smell of gasoline filled the room. Outside there was a volley of shots, followed by cries of male voices. A barrage of more shots followed. Captain Mueller frowned and went out the door. What the hell? He shouted. Get back here! Get back, cowards! Get back! The gunfire continued, mixed with the sounds of a struggle just outside the door. Joe held her rifle close to her. Anyone still in here? A voice called out from the door. It wasn't Mueller. Joe peeked around the island. Tyler was standing in the doorway. Joe gasped. Come, Tyler said. They're running. He looked around the room with sadness. Relief washed over Joe like an incoming tide. She crawled over to Darren. Sylvie, she shouted. Sylvie, come! There was noise in the basement, then cautious footsteps ascending the stairs. Sylvie stepped into the room and burst into tears. She ran to Sandy, knelt on the floor, and cradled his neck and head. "Hey, Ty!" a voice yelled from outside. "They're gone. We chased them a ways down the road, about a dozen of them." Tyler stepped outside. "How did we fare?" he asked. "Oh, 2 of us hurt, but nothing life-threatening. We sure caught them by surprise." 5 more minutes, said Tyler, and it all would have been lost. "You're going to pay bad for this," screamed Mueller's voice. "I am personally going to—" His words were cut off by the crack of a pistol. "Talk to the 40, Tyler said. Animal. The New World. Chapter 26. The New World. Darren opened his eyes to see Joe sitting next to his bed. He hurt all over, but especially his head and his right shoulder. "Joe," he said softly. "Darren!" She delicately hugged him, smiling broadly. "What happened?" he asked. "Tyler showed up," she said. "With 12 of his people. They caught Mueller's men from behind. Not many got away." "The others?" "Ma and Sylvie are fine," Joe said, "and the kids. Stevie wasn't hurt. He dragged Michael off into the woods when he got hit. Looks like Michael has a leg wound to match yours. Sandy and Denise are going to take a little longer, but Sylvie says they should both recover in a while. Sandy was touch and go at first, but he's stable and getting stronger." "We didn't get to hug Sid," said Darren. "Maybe another day," said Joe, "but not now." There was a knock in the doorway. Tyler was standing there. "May I come in?" he asked. "Please," said Darren. Tyler entered the room and stood by Darren's bed. "Why?" asked Darren. "Why did you risk everything by coming? I mean, I'm grateful, of course. But why? This wasn't your fight?" "That's what we thought at first," Tyler nodded. "But as we talked, we realized just how short-sighted that view was. See, if they took your place, then we would be the obvious next victims, and there'd be nobody there for us. All it would have taken for evil men to succeed would be for us to sit back in safety and comfort, thinking it wasn't our fight." "In reality," Tyler continued, "it really was our fight. The future, our future, hinged on what happened right here. This was our battle. If this were lost, we would have been hopeless, and our loss would have been inevitable. But we also knew that a win here would solidify our own safety, maybe for years to come. This may have been a great turning point for all of us." We owe you a great debt," Darren said. I see just the opposite," Tyler said. "It was your determination to resist to your last breath that bought our freedom. Did you realize that you people neutralized almost half their force? Your defense was relentless. There wasn't much for us to do when we got here except to surprise them and send them running away in panic. About a dozen got away. We bandaged up a handful of others, ones who'd been injured, and sent them limping home. We were sure to fill them with stories about the hordes of people living up here. But that captain, that wicked fellow, I sent him to God's judgment seat." The following month, the 2 communities met at the old farmhouse down the road to sign what would be known as the Kenny Farm Accords. The agreement formally merged the 2 communities together and defined a commonly agreed government for the group. 2 weeks after that, Stevie married Mariah, a young woman from the other community. Sandy and Sylvie moved into the Kenny farm as soon as Sandy had recovered enough. Over the next few weeks, supplies, livestock, and equipment were moved from the Tyler's homestead to the area surrounding the farm. They resolved that in the spring, they would begin building homes for the new community members. The community would work together to plant the fields surrounding the farm. Other families began to show up at the community, and many of them were granted entrance. That little community, which was born in despair in a dark basement was growing and full of hope. Their troubles were not over, but the hope that was born that day would carry them through every dark valley